And is the Oak Grove EMS respond to for Pembroke?
Yes,
For
ma'am.
that area? And what time did you arrive on scene?
15:33,
Which would be,
3:30 in the afternoon.
now, was law enforcement there when you arrived?
According to my run ticket, the sheriff's department was, yes, ma'am.
And where were you directed to go?
I was directed to go to the back of the house where the cellar was.
Where the cellar was?
Yes, ma'am.
And what were you there, what was your purpose?
I got called to a possible DOA at that location, and I was there to determine if it in fact was a DOA.
To determine if the person who had been found in the cellar was in fact deceased.
Yes, ma'am, correct.
So what did you do to make that assessment?
According to my run ticket, when I found him, he was lying down in the cellar, and I pronounced death based on our determination of death protocols.
Now, how was he positioned when you saw him?
When I saw him, he was laying on his back with his arms above his head, and his knees were bent on top of the wood.
And did it appear to be a natural position from
No, ma'am.
and why not?
The way that his legs were bent and how his arms were above his head is not natural.
What was he laying on?
He was laying on wood, pieces of wood.
Pieces of wood?
Yes, ma'am. Burnt pieces.
I'm sorry.
Burnt pieces of wood.
And you noticed those pieces of wood he was laying on were burned?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you notice, so it appeared to you that there had been a fire?
Yes.
Now, how did you assess his body?
Based on my run ticket that I wrote, it says that his legs and arms were bent above his head, or excuse me, his legs are bent and his arms are above his head. There's dried blood was present to his pants and his coat, and blood on his face. Nail beds were blue, and there were obvious signs of death present.
Were you able to determine if, you said his nail beds are blue, what about his pupils?
They were fixed and dilated. Clouded, I believe is what my run ticket says. They were non-reactive and clouded.
Now, is it your job as the paramedic to actually determine if the person is deceased?
It is part of my job, yes.
And you did do that here?
Yes, ma'am.
You made that determination?
Yes, ma'am.
On your report, you wrote the word under skin signs, cyanotic, and then mottled and lividity. What does that mean?
Cyanotic is blue in color, which means like the lips, nail beds are blue. And what was the other one?
Lividity.
Lividity is pooling of blood. From them laying down, the blood is going to pool towards the back.
And breathing is apneic. What does that mean?
That means no breathing at all.
Were you able to determine how long he may have been deceased?
I can't determine that, no.
Now, is it your job to then notify the coroner?
Yes, ma'am. After we've pronounced death, we notify the coroner.
And you did do that?
Yes, ma'am.
The Christian County coroner?
Yes, ma'am.
So after that, did you have any other reason to stay there?
No, ma'am. After I pronounced that and turn it over to the coroner, that's the end of my time.
Okay. So you weren't there when the body was moved from that pile of wood?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you, ma'am. That's all my questions.
Cross.
Thank you, Judge. Ma'am, I just have a couple of questions.
I wrote down the phrase determination of death protocols.
Yes.
What are those protocols? Is that the vitals, or is that your just visual observation?
There's a series of things, I don't have it with me in front of me right now, but there's certain things that certain criteria that we have to meet to be able to call that.
Okay. And you went through that?
Yes, I did.
Those criteria? Okay.
Yes.
You said Mr. Phillips' arms were, I'm not sure how you described it, they were up?
Above his head,
Okay.
according to my run ticket, yes.
Okay, and they weren't resting on what was beneath him, is that correct?
His entire body was on the wood, from what I can recall.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean then by his arms were up.
Let's show her the exhibit that reflects the position of the body. That'll be quicker than walking us through it.
Most recent. I think it's in that one. This thing.
It's exhibits
112?
111, 112, 113, 114. Yeah, that vicinity. You may.
These have been introduced as Commonwealth Exhibits 112 and 114. Is that how Mr. Phillips appeared when you saw him on the 19th of November?
To the best of my recollection, yes.
Okay. Do you see what I'm saying by his hands? You said in your report his hands appear to be up, so they're not like flat on what's beneath him, is that right?
I couldn't tell exactly from the angle that I was standing.
Okay.
Like I said, it's been a while, so
Well, if you look at 112, you see a shadow from Mr. Phillips' arm.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that arm is not on the wood directly, is it?
With the shadow, no, sir, it doesn't
Okay.
appear to be.
Okay. Thanks. And you said you had no further involvement in the case after you pronounced him dead?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, that's all I had.
You ready? Thank you, ma'am. You're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Call your next witness.
Philip Peterson.
Sir, place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're going to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Have a seat.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
State your name.
Philip Peterson.
And where do you work currently?
I work for Bar KP Video Security.
In 2015, were you a member of the Pembroke Volunteer Fire Department?
Yes.
And in that position, did you receive a call on the 19th of November?
Yes.
And what did you do? Where did you respond?
The original call was of a vehicle fire. It was in the proximity of between me and the fire department, so I went there first. As I approached, the car was had been on fire, had a little bit of smoke coming from it. So as I got there, got out and walked up to the vehicle to do an investigation, as I walked by the vehicle, I could see that there was obvious human remains there. So with that, I requested dispatch to send to the sheriff's office, and I just got back in my truck and waited for the sheriffs to get there.
So you were the first on scene,
Yes, ma'am.
and then you radioed for the sheriff's office to
Yes,
come.
ma'am.
Did you take any action in regard to the vehicle or anything in
No.
the vehicle?
No.
So you got back in your car and waited for,
Right, I had the initial engine that was coming stop at the road in the entrance to stop anybody else from coming in till the sheriff's department got there, and then, yes, I didn't do nothing until they got there.
were there other volunteer firefighters from Pembroke who also responded?
There was, yes.
And what did they do?
One of them came down to where I was, and the rest of them stayed at the, it's called staging area, which was at the road, at the gravel road where they came together, where the engine stopped.
So was Shane Rogers one of those?
Yes, ma'am.
And Doris Stokes
Yes, ma'am.
and Joe Staley?
Yes, ma'am. Joe Staley stayed at the truck, but he did come down. Eventually, he had to bring some equipment off the truck.
And what about Shane Rogers?
He did come down to the scene, yes.
And did he do anything
No.
in regard to the car?
No,
And what about Doris Stokes?
no, he did nothing to him.
Did he stay up at the entry to the road, or was he coming
He
down?
came down, but they did not do anything.
Take any action
No.
with the car? Okay. Did you go from the Rosetown Road scene to the 443 South Main?
Not directly. We left that scene, went back to the firehouse, and then we were called up there later on.
From the firehouse, you
Yes,
went to the house on
Correct.
South Main? And what did you do there?
We assisted the Christian County Rescue Squad in removing the body from the basement or from the cellar.
And did all four of the volunteer fire department respond to the house? Or can you recall?
I don't recall, I think two of the four of us that were there, two more did go to the house, maybe one, I can't remember exactly.
And you said the Christian County Rescue Squad also came to the house?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you all then move, when you all got there, was the body still laying down the cellar
Yes.
on the wood?
Yes, it was still positioned at the bottom of the steps, kind of on a wood pile.
And you all then moved the body to prepare to transport it?
Yes, we took a sheet and placed the body on the sheet to bring it up the stairs, and then from there, we put it into a body bag for transport.
Okay. Was the coroner there at that
Yes.
time? Okay. And did you, once the body was placed in a body bag, was that up on the,
Upon the
Porch
the
level
back
there?
porch, yes, ma'am.
and then did the rescue squad take over from there?
Yes, ma'am.
I believe that's all. Thank you.
Ross?
May I approach the witness?
Yes, sir.
Sir, I'm going to show you a crime scene entry log sheet from the Rosetown Road location and ask if you've seen that document or if you prepared that document.
No, I did not prepare this document.
Okay, have you seen it before?
Yes.
Okay, does this document indicate that Doris Ray Stokes was first to arrive on the scene of the Rosetown Road crime scene?
His name is listed first on here, yes.
Okay, thank you. Before yours.
Yes, but we arrived at the same time.
All right. Mr. Shane Rogers, you said he was at the crime scene, but he did not come down to the location of the car?
At the car, yes, sir, he did.
He did?
He was in the area. Now, whether he came across we had our truck sitting behind the vehicle, so I don't, he was there, but.
Yeah, I don't see him listed on this crime scene log at all, is my point. So did he come to the car?
He did not approach the car.
Okay. Is that why he's not on the log?
That I don't know.
All right, that's all I have, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for coming in.
Thank you.
You're free to go. Call your next witness.
Paul Rush.
Put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Have a seat. Thank you.
State your name, please,
Paul Rush,
and where are you employed?
Hopkinsville Fire Department.
And what's your position there?
I am a paramedic.
In November 2015, what was your job?
I worked with the Christian County Rescue Team in a volunteer position.
On November 19th, 2015, did you go on a run to 443 South Main Street?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the purpose? What did you do?
The purpose of that was for body recovery. We had a unit called Amherst where we would assist the coroner's office with body retrieval.
So when you got there, there were others from the rescue team with you?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you all, what was your purpose, the rescue team's purpose?
The rescue team was there to remove the body from the location it was in for the coroner's office and to transport it to either a medical examiner's office or a morgue.
So did you, in fact, move the body from the back of the house there to a vehicle?
I assisted with it under direction from my supervisors.
Yes. And where was the body transported from the house?
I do not recall.
Would Lamb's Funeral Home sound correct?
It would be one of the locations we would have transported, yes. But I do not recall exactly
And
where it
then
was.
from there, was the body transported to the medical examiner's office in Louisville?
Yes, I was not on that transfer, but it was transported there to my knowledge.
Okay. And that is protocol?
Yes,
It goes from the scene to the coroner actually is at the funeral home as well, correct? The coroner actually owns the funeral home.
I am not aware.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Ross?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
So, how long had you been on I call it the VFD, is that fair?
That's fair.
All right. How long had you been a member of the VFD at that point, back in 2015?
In 2015, I had probably been there maybe 5 or 6 months.
Okay. And how big a department is that? Is it huge? Is it little?
The Custer County Rescue Team, I believe, approximately had 45 to 50 members on it.
That's pretty big.
It's decent.
And is there, we're saying VFD, is there a professional full-time fire department as well? Or is it,
That department was only volunteer.
okay, that makes sense. Just checking. And with 45 or 50 people, it covers the whole county?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you said on that day you were part of a special unit?
It was part of a division of the Custer County Rescue Team called Amherst. We are partnered with the coroner's office to retrieve and transport deceased people from scenes.
Okay. And how many people are in that unit?
Anybody on the rescue team is also part of that unit as well.
Okay.
It's a dual purpose.
Got it. So the reason to differentiate that is because there's special training you get to be on that?
Not necessarily, no, sir. There is no special training as far as you just work under the direction of law enforcement and the coroner's office to package and transport. The only differentiation is that you're not using actual rescue equipment or emergency rescue vehicles themselves to transport this body. It's just a specialized truck is all it was.
Okay. How many people ride in that truck?
It's only applicable for 2 people.
When you got there, there had already been some folks from the VFD at the scene, right?
To my best recollection, yes, sir.
Okay, and I understand we're talking about 2015.
Yes.
So the part that was a little confusing to me, and it's probably just me, is can you remember when you arrived, where was the body at that time, when you first got there?
When I first got there, I do not recall. It's been too long.
Okay, that's fair. Part of your job is to make sure that the body is treated correctly, right, with respect, and also to follow any directions from law enforcement, right?
In the coroner's office, yes, sir.
In the coroner's office, right? So you're saying you don't remember exactly where it was. But you do remember what you and the other. How many other people from the unit were there with you? You may have said. Was it just 2 of you? Or was it like 4?
I do not recall.
Okay. But the body was still inside the house someplace, right?
To my best recollection, that is correct.
Okay. Were you there? Did you do anything else, or was it really just the movement of the body at that point?
To my best recollection, it is only the movement of the body, placing them in a body bag, and then loading them into the truck. That was the only things that we did.
Right. And I think you already told us it's been so long you don't remember where you drove it to, right?
That I do not recall.
Okay. Well, then I don't have any further questions. Thank you very much.
Cross, or redirect, I'm sorry.
May I post, please?
You may.
So, Mr. Rush, this is the call for service log.
Okay.
If you would take a look at this at 17:38. And that is the call for service, the Christian County Rescue Team. So at 17:38, what was going on?
1738, the Rescue 450, which is the Amherst unit that transports the deceased to wherever they're going, shows that they were en route to Lamb's funeral home, according to this log.
And then after that, what does it say?
At 1906, is that same unit was then en route to Louisville for the medical examiner's office.
So, and what time en route to Louisville?
At 1906.
So that would be 7:06 p.m.
Yes, ma'am.
And en route to Lamb's funeral home, at what time?
That was at 5:38 p.m.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all I have.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for coming in. You're free to go.
Thank you, sir.
Call your next witness, please.
Scott Noiseworthy, detective.
Yes, sir. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Judge, may we approach?
Yes, sir.
State your name, please,
My name is Scott Noiseworthy.
and what is your occupation?
I'm a deputy with the Christian County Sheriff's Department, ma'am.
How long have you been with Christian County Sheriff's Department?
In total, about 10 years, ma'am.
And were you employed there in 2015?
I was, ma'am.
On November 19th, 2015, were you called to the scene of a burned vehicle on Rosetown Road?
I was.
And what time did you arrive?
Approximately 9:03 in the morning, ma'am.
And what did you do when you got there?
As I came on scene, I was charged with beginning the investigation on the contents of the vehicle and if there was any witnesses or crimes that were associated with that.
And there were other officers that responded as well?
Many, ma'am. Yes,
What?
ma'am.
Okay. So you got there at a little after 9?
Yes, ma'am.
Were there Kentucky State Police there also?
Not at the time, no,
Not
ma'am.
at the time. Did they subsequently arrive?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, what action did you take from there?
So as we determined that inside the vehicle there was what we believe were 2 deceased individuals, we began roping off the vehicle that was severely burned in a field off of Rosetown Road. While we were doing that, we began coordinating with other agencies, specifically Kentucky State Police, to give us assistance due to the fact that arson was involved, and they have some specific knowledge and techniques that they use for that specific crime.
Go ahead, what else did you do? Were you able to locate an arson detective?
We attempted to make contact with one through the Kentucky State Police. Post 2 was unavailable, Post 3 was unavailable, and eventually we determined that the Post 1 arson investigator was unavailable also. So then we contacted the detective division through Kentucky State Police, and we got in contact with Detective Scott Smith.
And why was that?
Just to assist us with any type of processing that comes with the vehicle. At the time, nobody in our agency was arson crime scene certified or anything like that, so we wanted to make sure we got someplace that they could adequately access and diagram the crime scene.
Now, at some point, did you leave that scene?
I did, ma'am.
And so who was in charge of that scene?
It was, we only left after the vehicle was loaded up on a wrecker service and it was transported to the Christian County Sheriff's Department warehouse. Following that, leaving the scene, I left along with other deputies and we went to 443 South Main Street, and that was after a search warrant had been obtained by Detective Myers to search the residence.
So were you there when Detective Myers and Reed were there?
I was, ma'am.
And Detective Reed was doing the photographing,
He was, ma'am.
and Detective Myers was collecting evidence?
That's correct.
So what was your role?
My role was basically to oversee all that was going on. If there was any questions that any of the detectives had on scene, that I would try to get them the answers as quickly as I could. If they needed any resources, specifically either EMS or any other type of resources they would need, I was the one that would try to schedule and make that available to them.
Okay. We would direct your attention to the poster board.
Yes, ma'am.
Which is now been marked as Commonwealth's Exhibit 153. This is a diagram. Would you describe what we see in this diagram?
It looks consistent with 443 South Main, ma'am.
And where would the front of the house be?
So the front of the house would be somewhere in this area right here, ma'am.
And the back porch area?
Yeah.
If you want to step down.
Yeah. So this is, this is the back screen porch, which is on the back side of the house. This will be the very front. It's nothing but the steps here. And this is the cell right here.
And if you would turn that easel a little bit to the straight. Thank you.
Better.
And the driveway, the shared driveway with the house next door.
So it runs this way. Probably somewhere right in here is when it kind of stops as far as the asphalt goes, and then runs out to the roadway, and then Pembroke Road, or the main road is out this way. This is the back, essentially the side entrance to the back screening porch, and this is the rear entrance to the back screening porch.
And then the foyer area where it was where the wallet of Calvin Phillips was located on the shelf. Could you point that out?
Now, this is, it's in the foyer area, so this is the back screen and porch. This is the door that comes into the main portion of the house, and then the foyer right here, and then there was, right in this area where the wallet was found.
And the kitchen would be where?
Kitchen would be right here, which would be directly, if you're looking at it, if you're walking in, it's directly to your left. But that's the kitchen, it's adjacent to the foyer.
And then the steps to the cellar?
They're right here, man. And then, again, this is the back screen and porch, and this is still part of that back screen and porch. And that cellar is right there, right next to the main entrance to the house.
And you say the main entrance, you mean the main entrance from the side
From the back screen and
by
porch.
the driveway?
Well, this is the actual entrance into the
Oh, you
main.
mean into the house as opposed to into the back porch?
That's correct, yes, ma'am, I apologize.
Now, if you can flip that diagram over to show the next diagram on exhibit 154. And what do we see in this diagram?
Let's see here. So this would be the shared driveway between the two houses. The wood fence, here's the sidewalk coming up to the house, and this is the shed and the portion of the shared driveway. You have a wire fence, and then it turns into a wood fence.
Now, where is the door that leads to the driveway?
So the door would be, this would be the sidewalk coming in. And if I'm correct in this, this is the door going into the side of the house. Is that?
And the front of the house facing Main Street.
Yes, ma'am. So Main Street would be this right here. So I'm sorry, I got mine. This is the Main Street, which is the front. This is the front sidewalk to the house, the white wood fence. And this is the shared driveway. So it would be on this side coming up that way would be where the two the driveways that are shared by each of the residents. And then that's when it begins the wood fence, where you can partially get in, go from one residence to the other. There's a little bit of a gap there that you can get specifically from one portion of the residence to the other.
Point out the wood fence again.
Right there. So right here is where you can just kind of walk around it. It's where it stops, and then you can go to both of the driveways, and then you can get in specifically to where the driveway is. And as it's notated, this is where the shed was. So you have the house here, and then it's off to the side, and it kind of parallels back right to the shed. But this is how you're able to access from one residence to the other.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Would you like this back now?
You can keep it up there.
Okay.
Now, at some point during that afternoon, as the process of collecting evidence was going on, did a woman approach you or other officers there at the house?
They did, ma'am.
Outside?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was that?
That was Frances LaRock, ma'am.
And did you speak with her at that time?
I did, ma'am.
And I'm not going to ask you what she said, but did you learn that she was a friend of Cal and Pam Phillips?
I did, ma'am.
And so, at that time, she had something to tell you?
She did.
Okay. During the process of continuing to collect evidence, did you learn, how did you learn that Calvin Phillips was scheduled to be a witness in the court-martial of the defendant?
So during the execution of the search warrant, the deputies that were searching the house located a subpoena that was laying out in plain view that notated that Mr. Phillips was a witness in a court-martial on the Fort Campbell military base.
And did you take any action after detectives collected that subpoena?
Yes, ma'am. I was able to contact Fort Campbell Military CID to see if we could make contact with them and get any further insight on the reasoning behind why Mr. Phillips was a witness to a court-martial.
And so did a CID agent come to the house?
Several of them, ma'am.
And they communicated to you circumstances regarding the subpoena?
They did, ma'am.
And the court-martial?
They did.
During the process of evidence collection, did you yourself personally collect an item in the cellar?
I did, ma'am.
Item R26?
That is correct.
And what is that?
That was some burnt paper as well as some burnt plastic that was in the bottom of the cellar.
And so you collected that?
I did.
Apparently, everything else had been collected by Detective Myers.
That's correct, ma'am.
Now, after or during this process, did you or others speak to any of the neighbors on the street?
The deputies that were arriving that were not part of the evidence collection team at the house did a neighborhood canvass, and they attempted to make contact with the neighbor directly next door, but were unable to do so. It's my understanding they went to the front door to try to make contact, but were unable to get anybody to answer. So as we progressed along with our evidence collection, we noticed that the next door neighbor hadn't come home, and we felt that was kind of unusual, so we went to the side door. And we found that side door wide open, and there was nobody would come to our calls, because we identified ourselves as the sheriff's department if anybody was in there to come to us. And we were unable to get anybody to come to the door.
And that would be the house to the left with the shared driveway,
That is correct, ma'am.
which you later learned was Mr. Ed Donzero's house.
Yes, ma'am.
So you tried to get in, the door was open,
The door was open, the side door was open, yes, ma'am.
but there was no one in the house.
No one in the house.
Did you observe something in the house? Did you observe a holster laying in the easy chair?
I did, ma'am.
And what did you do in regard to the holster?
So when nobody would come to the door, we did a protective sweep in the house just to make sure there was no other victims or any evidence of a crime that were specifically in that house. As we were doing that protective sweep, we noticed a leather holster that was sitting on a chair right inside the door. And that was specific because there was nobody in there, and the door was, and the holster was there by itself and no gun in it.
Had you observed the gun that was found in the backyard of the Phillips residence?
I did, ma'am.
When you saw the holster in the easy chair, did you make a connection?
Yes, ma'am. It appeared they were connected, that they fit. I'm no holster expert, but it looked like that style of weapon, which was an older model firearm, would go in some type of holster like that.
And I believe Detective Reed collected that holster.
He did.
After the processing of the scene on the 19th,
Yes, ma'am.
what was done with the house to secure it?
So we were still not ready to release the scene at the house based upon the search warrant that we had obtained. So we called 2 deputies that stayed overnight with the residents, and they were assigned specifically to those 2 houses to make sure that there was nobody that could enter or leave if there was anybody, and keep the residents secure so that when we come back in the next morning, no chain of custody issues could be brought up or anything like that.
Now, the item of evidence that you collected, the burned debris and plastic in the cellar, was that secured with all the other evidence
Yes, ma'am.
after you left the scene that day?
Yes, ma'am.
In the evidence room at the sheriff's office?
Yes, ma'am.
Subsequent to that day, on November 30th, 2015, did you receive a call to go to the Phillips residence
I did, ma'am.
and explain what you did at that time?
So I was contacted by the Phillips family, specifically Mr. Matt Phillips, in regard to them finding a .22 projectile in the kitchen as they were cleaning up the residence that from all their parents' personal belongings. They were cleaning that up. They found a .22 projectile in the kitchen. I believe it was underneath some type of maybe appliance or some type right underneath in the kitchen. And they also provided us with dog tags that were found in the foyer area in the residence.
And who was it that you obtained those items from?
Matt Phillips.
Well, Detective, it's been admitted as Commonwealth's Exhibit 1. Is that the dog tag you received from Matt
It's
Phillips?
consistent with what I remember, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And what is written on it?
Can you spin around? Here we go. It says, first line is Martin, second line is Kit. There's a social security number, O positive, and Roman Catholic, subsequent lines.
Thank you. So you received it, and what did you do with it?
We placed it in evidence, ma'am.
Now, you indicated that on the same day, you also received this .22 caliber bullet,
Yes, ma'am.
which had been found in the kitchen.
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you do with the bullet?
Placed into evidence, ma'am.
On that same day at night, did you accompany Lieutenant Smith back to the house to apply the Blue Star reagent?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the purpose?
To identify if there was any blood residue that could not be seen from the naked eye.
And did that have a connection with the finding of the .22 caliber bullet?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the thought process?
Well, the thought process was that there was some cleanup done, some extensive cleanup done. So we wanted to see if there was any kind of residual, anything that had gotten below the surface of either the flooring in there or on the flooring that was either cleaned up in hopes that if there was some, that it would identify itself by using the Blue Star reagent.
And you all did, as Lieutenant Smith has testified, you all did get some reactions?
We did, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Following that day, did you have occasion to conduct some interviews?
I did, ma'am.
Ongoing investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you interview Austin Spencer?
I did.
And who is he?
He is Miss Laura Spencer's son.
And who is Laura Spencer?
She is the defendant's fiance.
And at the time, where did she live?
At the house with the defendant.
In the house, the defendant's house?
Yes, ma'am. 458 South Main.
458, across the street, directly from Mr. Gonzaro.
That's correct, ma'am.
And did you interview Emma Spencer?
I did.
And who is she?
She is the daughter to Laura Spencer.
Did you then, several days later, interview Joan Harmon?
I did, ma'am.
And who is she?
She was an individual that was identified to us as the defendant's ex-wife.
Okay. On December 22nd, did you transport a large amount of evidence from the evidence room to the crime lab for testing?
I did, ma'am.
On several months later, the evidence, some of the evidence that had been obtained through the execution of the search warrant of the defendant's home on November 20th included the Sentry safe that had been found upstairs, transported to the warehouse.
That's correct, ma'am.
Did you take action in regard to the safe?
I did, ma'am.
What did you do?
So I applied for and obtained a search warrant to search the contents of the safe. Also included in that, because it was a digital lock on the safe, I had to send off the copy of the search warrant to Sentry Safe to obtain a code to open the search warrant, or open the safe rather. And that was, they responded back to me on the 23rd of February, and they provided me with a code to open the safe, ma'am.
On February 23rd?
Yes, ma'am. And then the search warrant was executed on February 24th by myself and Lieutenant Smith.
At the warehouse?
At the warehouse, yes,
So you
ma'am.
opened the safe,
We did.
and what did you find inside the safe?
We located a Glock handgun that was a .45 caliber.
You marked it as an exhibit. I believe that's exhibit 155. Detective, can you identify what's in the box?
It was a handgun, some rounds, and a magazine.
And can you hold that up so that it can be seen?
Yes, ma'am.
Just hold it up a little higher, please.
Okay.
And is that the Glock 45 that you found and removed from the safe?
Yes, ma'am.
What other items are in that? What other items?
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a magazine and there's some unspent rounds at the very top of the handgun.
Okay, you want to hold that up again so we can see the magazine? And the unspent rounds came from where?
The magazine.
do with the Glock after you removed it?
We placed it into evidence, and then it was subsequently sent to the lab to be tested.
And that was identified in your evidence log as item 619.5.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, in the safe, after you opened it, after receiving the code from the manufacturer, did you locate some paperwork?
I did, ma'am.
Detective handed you Commonwealth Exhibit 156.
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that document?
It is a power of attorney, ma'am.
And is it, did you flip to the signature page?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's a power of attorney executed by who?
The defendant,
And who did he designate power of attorney to?
that would be Laura Spencer.
And what date was that signed?
November 16th, ma'am, of 2015.
And that is the document you removed at the same time you removed the gun.
That is correct, ma'am.
Move to admit Commonwealth Exhibit 156.
Yes, ma'am. 156.
What did you do with that power of attorney when you removed?
We placed it into evidence, ma'am.
Now, subsequently, I think you may have already stated, that Glock 45 was transported to the crime lab
That's correct,
for
ma'am.
testing.
Yes, ma'am.
And it, at some point, returned from the lab and placed back into evidence?
That's correct, ma'am.
I believe that's all questions you may ask.
Pause.
Detective Noiseworthy, is that the correct rank now?
Excuse me, sir?
Is that the correct rank now? I don't want to get it wrong.
I'm a deputy now, sir.
Deputy, okay.
Yes, sir.
From the beginning of this case, you were the lead officer for the sheriff's office?
I was.
Okay. Can I move this, Barbara? Sorry. Thanks. You said you coordinated the activities of the other detectives the first day?
Yes, sir.
At the two crime scenes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me show you a report I'm going to be asking you some questions about. I only see 2 reports from you in this case. Does that sound right?
That's correct, sir.
Let me show you the first one.
Okay.
It's actually a report and a supplement.
Yeah, actually, it depends on how you look at it. The Nivers was the initial call, and then I did 2 supplements, so
Okay.
3 technically total.
So look at these and make sure these are the ones you prepared, if you would.
Yes, sir.
And I'll get the other one while you're looking at that.
This is my supplement, my initial, and this is the Nivers that was completed. I believe there's one more.
And then this is the second supplement?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, and that's all you prepared in this case?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, what you're calling the Nivers report, the first 3 pages, that's sort of a form you fill out just to get a case going, is that right?
That is correct, sir.
It doesn't contain a lot of narrative information?
It does not contain a lot of narrative.
Just enough that someone could walk in and say, oh, this is about...
That's correct, sir.
Okay.
Yeah,
So the first main report is the first supplement you did?
that's correct, sir.
Now, your report, I'm going to call that the report, okay? The
Yes, sir.
first supplement. It indicates you're at the scene of Rosetown Road and you're coordinating with the Kentucky State Police arson investigator and Detective Scott Smith.
That's right.
I thought you just said there were no arson investigators available.
There weren't. We were trying to get them to respond, and they were unable to do
So
so.
Post 2 didn't have one,
No,
and
sir.
Post 2 is at Madisonville.
That's correct.
And Post 1 is down in Hickory in Graves County.
It's,
Right.
I think it's Trigg. Trigg and,
I know there's a post down in Graves County.
yeah, I'm sure, that may be Post 3.
Okay. They didn't have one either.
Nobody had one available,
Okay.
sir.
So you're really just coordinating with Detective Smith?
That's correct,
basically.
sir.
All right. Now, was Ed Stokes on the scene at the Rosetown Road location?
He was.
And he's your lieutenant?
He was.
And was he also one of the first officers to make it to 443 South Main?
He was, sir.
Were you present for the conversation involving, let me just read it from a report.
Is it from my report, sir?
No, it's a line in one of Scott Smith's reports, but it sounds like you were present or at least involved in it, that you mentioned Chief Deputy Billy Gloyd a minute ago, requested that Scott Smith take the investigation due to the possibility of a conflict in the agency because Ed Stokes' brother, William Stokes, was dating Joan Harmon at the time.
Right.
Were you present for that?
I believe I remember being part of that conversation, yes, sir.
So why would William Stokes and Joan Harmon's involvement in this case make it a conflict for the sheriff's office?
Well, that was conversations that were above my pay grade, and I was acting as the lead detective, but at the time that the actual incident occurred, I had no rank, so I was just following what my command staff were communicating with, essentially communicating down to me, sir.
So somebody higher than you decided that was a conflict with the sheriff's office?
There was conversation about it, yes, sir.
Okay. So was Ed Stokes in fact taken off this case?
He was.
Okay. Okay, so after you left the Rosetown Road area, you went to, did you go straight to 443 South Main?
Yes, sir.
So you had already, someone had already run the tag and determined that the tag came back to the Phillips residence on Main Street.
Yes, sir.
And I believe the crime scene log shows you arriving looks like about 4 or 5 of you arrived at the same time.
That's correct, sir.
Now, in fact, Ed Stokes was one of those, but he was subsequently taken off the case?
That's correct.
Okay. But he was one of the first ones at that scene?
He was.
And you recall seeing the other brother, Doris Ray Stokes, at the Rosetown Road scene?
I know he's on a crime scene log, but I don't specifically remember seeing him.
But you have seen his name as first on the scene, in fact?
I have seen it on the
Okay.
crime scene log, yes, sir.
In your narrative for the events of the 19th, you describe a lot of what we've heard today about Mark Reed finding various items and
Yes, sir.
And Detective Myers taking, Reed took the photographs and Myers took them into evidence.
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
And you've noted a lot of these on here, so I'm not gonna go back through them with you.
Okay.
Because you were the one who transported these items to the lab after they were collected by Reed and Murphy?
Depending on which one you're talking about, some of them, most of them I was, yes, sir. But I would have to make sure I referred to the 41 forms just to make sure.
Okay, a lot of the reports in Detective or Lieutenant Smith's file, it says Noiseworthy and I did
That's correct.
X. It
That's
sounds like
correct.
you all did a whole lot of things
We
together.
did a lot of stuff together, yes, sir.
Now, did you participate in the, it wasn't a search, but a walkthrough of the Doncereau residence that evening?
I was, yes, sir.
Okay, and you saw the empty holster but did not retrieve it at that time?
We did not retrieve it, no, sir.
All right, your report, it's kind of jarring. There's no mention of Christian Martin in any event on the 19th, and then suddenly on your entry for 11/20, the first thing you talk about is preparing a search warrant for Christian Martin's residence.
Yes, sir.
So, have you left some things out of this report?
No, sir.
You had to have learned something about Martin, to start talking about Martin on 11/20.
Absolutely. And it was notated in that we spoke with CID, and those conversations, there was a lot of conversations that went on that are not specifically dictated in any supplement, because there are.
The CID reference on your report comes in after you are preparing a search warrant.
Do what now?
You describe preparing a search warrant for Christian Martin's residence, and then later on, you talk about meeting with CID.
The CID was on scene on the 19th, sir. So they were contacted that night.
You didn't mention that in your report, though.
I believe it's in there.
It's in there on the 20th.
I don't know, do you have the calls for service, sir?
Over there, I do.
Okay. So at 1447, my badge number was 619 at the time. Specifically 1447-44, 619 asked 653, the name on the subpoena was advised a female with the last name of Martin. I advised, and that was an error, advised he had it with him and who served him. 619 requested number, 653 advised it was Captain Stwaffer and provided a phone number.
So you're saying your report's not accurate?
I'm saying it's just not dictated in there.
Okay. So there's no mention of the CID in your supplement on the 19th? I just want to make that clear.
That's correct, sir.
Okay.
Not that I'm seeing right off the bat.
I'm sorry?
Not that I'm seeing right off the bat, sir.
So then on the 20th, you're preparing a search warrant for Martin's residence,
We were.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Who decided to use SWAT?
It was basically a combined thought process because of his military
But
experience.
he was at his job at Fort Campbell.
So it was a combined effort and a combined conversation that we talked about, and because of his military involvement and the possible possession of long guns inside, that we thought it was the safest route to utilize the SWAT team to make entry and secure the house.
You confirmed he was on base at Fort Campbell.
We confirmed he was on base, yes,
And
sir.
then you asked Fort Campbell to detain him so you could do the search of his house.
But that doesn't mean anybody else is not inside his house,
Well,
sir.
you knew his kids were at school.
That doesn't mean anybody else is not inside his house,
So
sir.
Laura, the nurse, you thought was going to attack the entire Christian County Sheriff's Office with all of his long guns?
It's happened before, sir.
Yeah, I bet it is.
We need to make sure that we're safe.
You said someone approached you at the scene of 443 South Main the evening of the 19th. That was a woman named Frances LaRock,
I did,
and you interviewed her?
I did,
And you recorded that interview?
I did.
One of the reports indicates Lieutenant Wallace did a neighborhood canvass the evening of the 19th.
He did.
Is that how he discovered Dan Thoreau's empty house?
He went to the front door from the best of my recollection, and the actual door that was open was the side door. So,
Okay. You recall getting a call from William Stokes? You might have got this through dispatch. It said, I'm going to read it word for word. Mr. Stokes called stating that someone is going to kill a witness because she is an eyewitness to a case with her ex-husband, Mr. Martin, that lives across the street from the house they are at. You remember that?
is it in the calls for service? Or
It
that
is.
I don't specifically remember it, but if it's in the calls for service, then it took
It says
place.
619 was advised to call him. That's you.
Okay,
And that's William Stokes,
right.
Lieutenant Stokes' brother. And then you got another call. I'm asking if you remember getting this.
I'll move.
All right, so back to the search of Martin's home. He was at work. He was detained at your request. His kids were at school, and Laura, the nurse, was home alone. And you all raided the house with a SWAT team. So were you involved in that?
I was.
Okay. And you've already described the evidence that you seized, including a Glock.
I did.
That you eventually recovered from a safe.
I did, sir.
You did an ATF, you requested an ATF, what's it called, firearms trace summary,
Yes, sir.
and you learned that he had purchased that gun at a gun store, basically, back in 2011?
You'll have to show me the form, sir.
That's where I'm getting the date, right there.
Yeah, yes, sir. So it appears the dealer information is On Target Incorporated, 915 North Thompson Lane in Murfreesboro, Tennessee on 6/27/2011.
Okay, thank you. In December of 2015, you you learned that the AT&T store on Fort Campbell Boulevard in Hopkinsville had come into possession of Pam Phillips' cell phone, is that right?
That's correct, sir.
Did you get a call from an AT&T employee?
No, sir.
Dispatch?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and did you respond to the AT&T store?
I did, sir.
Okay, and I believe your report indicates you watched video, the store itself had surveillance video?
I did, sir.
And you watched that video, and it was clear that Joan Harmon was the person who brought this phone in?
It appeared that way, yes, sir.
Okay. In fact, your report, let me find it. December 31st, is that right?
That's correct, sir. New Year's Eve.
I believe this is on that other report you talked about.
That's right, the other one. It's the shorter one.
Your report says, when I viewed it, meaning the surveillance video, it was apparent that the person was Joan Martin. So is that right?
Yes, sir.
And when you retrieved the phone from the AT&T store, it had already been wiped or restored to factory settings, is that right?
Correct, sir.
In fact, while you were still in the store, you got a call from Joan Harmon, didn't you?
I believe that's correct.
She was trying to tell you the story about how she came.
Sustained. Judge, can we approach? No. Sustained.
You also got a call from William Stokes while you were still at the store, right? Or soon after?
According to my supplement, yes, sir.
Okay. You retrieved, or you took the phone into custody,
I did, sir.
and has that been sent on to electronic crimes or
It was-
wherever you sent the other phones?
It was part of all that, yes, sir.
Okay. The three weapons or handguns that were found in Calvin Phillips' house by Reed and Myers, you witnessed them taking them into evidence?
I remember then seeing them. I don't specifically remember witnessing them bagging them up and placing
Well,
them.
okay, did you see I think there was a handgun on the table near the back door?
Correct, sir.
And then one upstairs on the nightstand? by
That's
the
correct,
bed?
sir. Mm-hmm.
And then there was a third one, I think, also on the first floor at another entrance.
I'd have to see that, but I believe that's correct, sir.
Well, let me grab that so I'm not inaccurate. So, just to reiterate, still saying agree, not buy now.
Okay.
A Ruger P94 9mm pistol found on table in rear entrance hallway.
Yes,
Did you
sir.
see that one?
Yeah.
And a Glock 19 pistol with 3 mags located on table in upstairs foyer.
Yes,
So I
sir.
was wrong, it was upstairs,
Yes,
not
sir.
down. And then, excuse me, a Charter Arms 38 caliber revolver found upstairs in the main bedroom on table to the left of bed.
Correct, sir.
You saw all 3 of those?
Yes, sir.
So these guns weren't in the attic, they were in the living part of the house?
That's right.
All right. Judge, may I have a second with counsel? I may be done. did have one more series of questions about the Rosetown Road scene. I believe one of the other detectives interviewed two men named Hammock and Jet.
That's correct, sir.
Did you go to Mr. Hammock and retrieve copies of his security video from his home security camera?
Yes, sir.
You took that into, now he wouldn't give you the whole system, right?
He would not, no.
So how did you download it?
We just had a portable drive.
Okay. And so have you reviewed that video?
Not in a long time, but I did it.
At some point?
At some point I did.
Did you watch it on his system or did you record it and take it back with you to watch later?
I believe I watched it both.
Okay.
At the time that we made contact with him, and then later on, I'm sure I reviewed it at some point through the investigation.
And his system, if you recall, has two cameras? Or do you recall?
I don't recall.
Okay. And then you turned that over to the AGs
That's correct.
as part of discovery?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Judge, I'm asking you to approach.
All right.
Deputy Scott Noiseworthy has been examined, cross-examined, and interestingly, there was an objection that the court sustained, and the court said you can't come up to the bench. They did just go to the bench. Let's go back to court.
First of all, don't know if I actually asked to admit exhibits 153 and 154, two diagrams as Commonwealth exhibits.
Do you did?
No, sir.
Will be marked and entered.
Detective, you were asked about the conversations you had with CID, and what does CID stand for?
The Criminal Investigation Division. I'm
Of the U.S. Army
of the United States military, yes, ma'am.
at Fort Campbell.
At Fort Campbell.
And you stated that several came to the Phillips residence on the afternoon of the 19th,
Yes, ma'am.
after you called when you found the subpoena.
I did.
So I'm going to hand you this call. I'm going to hand you Commonwealth Exhibit 157, crime scene entry log.
Yes, ma'am.
And if you would look down on that first page, you see the names of the CID agents that came to the house on the 19th.
That's correct.
And how many are there?
4, ma'am.
And what time did they arrive?
17:20, which is 5:20 in the afternoon.
And at that time, is 5:20 in the afternoon, is when you had the conversations with the CID agents?
That's correct.
About the court martial?
Yes, ma'am.
And the Calvin Phillips relation to that case as a witness?
Yes, ma'am.
Move to admit Exhibit 157.
Any objection?
Oh, no objection.
Will be marked and entered.
Now, when you went to the, I think you said December 31st, the AT&T store, was that the AT&T store in Hopkinsville?
It was, yes, ma'am.
And is that where you obtained the cell phone later determined to belong to Pam Phillips?
Yes, ma'am.
And at that time, did the manager, or I think the manager of the AT&T store, provide to you the surveillance video
Yes, ma'am.
of the phone being brought in to the AT&T store?
Yes, ma'am.
And you collected that, or you took possession of that surveillance video?
I did, ma'am.
And the manager then provided you also with the phone?
Yes, she did.
So you collected both the video, surveillance, and the phone,
That's correct.
and you put both of those into evidence?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you later, or at some point, watched the video?
Yes, ma'am.
And in the video, you see Joan Harmon bringing the cell phone and turning it into the AT&T?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, and you said that was December 31st?
Yes, ma'am.
Now back to the search on the defendant's home on November 20th. On that day, did you also obtain the cell phone of the defendant?
We did.
And where did you obtain that?
From the Fort Campbell Military Army Base, specifically, he was in a CID holding cell, or what I believe was a CID holding cell. He was detained by CID at Fort Campbell until the execution of the search warrant was completed.
While the search warrant was going on?
Yes, ma'am.
And so at that time, you obtained the cell phone from CID personnel?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you do with the cell phone?
It was placed into evidence.
Back at the sheriff's office?
That's correct,
You
yes,
took
ma'am.
possession of it
We did.
and then secured it in the evidence room at the sheriff's office?
We did.
And at later points, it was transported for examination?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, that's all.
Recross?
Just one question, I want to make it clear, he was detained at Fort Campbell at the request of you or other law enforcement officers in Christian County?
Well, we executed the search warrant. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Nothing.
All right, thank you. Give me a step down. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break at this time, 15 minutes. Please remember the court's admonition, and if everyone would allow the jury to exit the courtroom first, we would appreciate it. Thank you very much. 15-minute break.
Kentucky versus Christian Martin. You just heard the last witness finish testifying. The judge is taking a 15-minute break. While they take a break, we will take a break. You will not miss anything. Stay here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
When COVID-19 attacked, America fought back. Frontline workers took action. U.S. manufacturers developed vaccines in record time. Now, we're getting back to work safely. But some in Washington just haven't learned, diminishing America's ability to develop life-saving cures and vaccines, imposing patient access restrictions, leaving us less prepared and more reliant on other nations. Tell Representative Bordeaux. Vote no on H.R. 3. Paid for by the National Association of Manufacturers.
Race, psychology, technology, reality. Video games are changing the world in ways you may not realize. Newsy presents Next Level, now streaming.
We're gonna go deep.
We drove across the state to get here. We're working hard to get you the news you need.
We dig a little deeper on the stories of the day
That's why we're here.
to help start making sense of it all.
What do you think the future looks like?
We see the storms getting worse.
Bad news is, you're in prison.
More people are coming into VR every day.
Are we in a killer robots arms race right now?
You know, this is the evil part of it all.
An all-new true crime series.
It was justifiable homicide.
I swung the hammer and I hit her.
And I just fired the gun.
This is the whole truth
Couldn't keep my life straight.
behind the true crime.
Something wicked this way comes. Something wicked this way comes.
Judgment with Ashley Banfield. All new episodes Sunday nights at 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Like what you're seeing from Newsy? Maybe you have a suggestion. Well, we want to hear from you. You can get in touch with us at feedback@newsy.com anytime. Newsy, be informed, not influenced.
You know, this is the evil part of it all.
An all-new true crime series.
It was justifiable homicide.
I swung the hammer and I hit her.
And I just fired the gun.
This is the whole truth
Couldn't keep my life straight.
behind the true crime.
Something wicked
Judgment with Ashley Banfield. All new episodes, Sunday nights at 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
I'm Vinnie Politan. You know, I stood before a jury on both sides of the courtroom. First as a prosecutor, then as a defense attorney. But with Court TV, you're the jury. You see every moment of testimony.
Y'all know I didn't do this.
Every story unfolds.
I'm sorry for my crime.
Until a verdict is rendered and justice is served.
The all-new Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
We're gonna go deep.
We drove across the state to get here. We're working hard to get you the news you need.
We dig a little deeper on the stories of the day
That's why we're here.
to help start making sense of it all.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott, honored to be with you this Monday afternoon. It is a busy day here on Court TV. We are inside two courtrooms in California. Testimony continues in the Robert Durst Jinks murder trial. They are on a lunch break, so right now the court is in recess for that break. In Kentucky, we are in day 3 of testimony in the Commonwealth of Kentucky versus Christian Kit Martin. This is the case in which the former Army Ranger and commercial airline pilot is accused of killing 3 of his neighbors, Cal and Pam Phillips and Ed Donsero. The murders happened in late 2015 in Pembroke, Kentucky, a small town in southwestern part of the state, but the trial is actually being held in Elizabethtown, about 2 hours away from where the crimes occurred. Today, the jury heard testimony about blood evidence found in the shared driveway of the victims. But outside the presence of the jury, we have learned a lot more about the prosecution's case and how they wanted to call Chris Martin's ex-wife, Joan Harmon, as a witness.
Neither witness has grounds to invoke the Fifth Amendment. Neither witness was ever advised of their rights when interviewed by law enforcement. Neither witness has ever made a statement incriminating themselves. The mere allegations, incriminating themselves in these crimes. The mere allegations by the defense that one of both was an alternative. The perpetrator is not, alternative perpetrator evidence is common. It may or may not be based in fact. The mere allegation by a defendant that a particular person is an alternative perpetrator does not lead to that person being able to invoke Fifth Amendment privilege. When there's been no evidence whatsoever in the investigation that either one of these witnesses was or is a suspect in these murders.
Joining us now, Court TV legal correspondent Julia Janae, who is live in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, covering this trial. Julia, we have a lot to talk about. We just heard the state, because there are 2 witnesses, as I understand it. We have Joan Harmon along with Elijah Jones' son, and a whole argument before the court about whether or not they should be allowed to testify or could invoke their Fifth Amendment right to prevent themselves from self-incrimination.
Judge Ashley, this was fascinating legal argument outside the presence of the jury during the lunch hour. And like you said, it has to do with 2 witnesses that the defense wants to call once they start their case in chief. And that includes the ex of the defendant, Joan Harmon, and her son, Justin Elijah. You see Joan Harmon there. And their arguments via their attorneys, one was over the phone, one was there in person today, is that they have a right to plead the Fifth in this case because the way the defense is going to be questioning them on the stand, that it will expose them to prosecution regardless of what their answers are. There's going to be this insinuation that they are suspects in this case and are culpable for these crimes. The attorney for Joan Harmon actually said that the defense is trying to elicit a Perry Mason-like moment in the courtroom, and they'll likely be trying to pin this on them and see how they'll answer those questions. The judge at first ruled that no, it does not seem that they have the right to plead the fifth if their answers won't incriminate them. But he looked at some more case law that was presented to him by those attorneys representing those witnesses, and then he did determine that because the questions may seem to expose them to prosecution in the way that they are asked, they indeed have that right to plead the fifth. So we may not be seeing them in the courthouse at all taking the stand.
All right, so first a factual question I have for you, and that is Joan Harmon. Is this the same ex that was married to someone else, and so she was a bigamist, or is that a different ex?
This is the same ex, the one who was married to him many years ago, and then they went through a divorce, and he found out that she was already married to someone else, so she did ultimately plead guilty to a charge of bigamy in a court of law. But also, she is the one whose allegations were the basis for the court-martial proceedings. Those court-martial proceedings are the one that the victim in this case, Calvin Phillips, was being subpoenaed to be a prosecution witness for. And that is the basis for the state's argument in their case in chief in this case, that she was, or rather Calvin Phillips, was going to be testifying against Christian Martin, and that was his motive for killing him.
All right, so, you know, as a judge, when somebody comes before me and they want to do something, they have to provide the law, and I'm sometimes in a position to have to look at the law right there and then and read the case law and make a decision. That's the role of the judge. And I think that viewers see this and see, well, the judge made one decision and then basically they convinced him, he looked at it again and convinced him otherwise and said, okay, they don't have to testify. So that means the jury is not going to hear from these two individuals. Julia, you were there in the courtroom. How did the attorneys react to the judge's final ruling, or did they? Could you tell anything by their facial expressions?
Well, you know what was interesting? The state and defense, or Commonwealth and defense here in Kentucky, were on the same side on this. They both want these witnesses to have to come into the courtroom and testify. And I would imagine it's because not only does the defense want this witness on the stand to show that this is someone else who should have been investigated by authorities, but the Commonwealth doesn't want there to be this unavailable witness. The jury has heard a lot about Joan Harmon up until this point, and if she never takes the stand and never answers some of these tough questions that the defense has and is already insinuated in their opening statements, then that is going to be a big question mark on the state's case. Could amount to reasonable doubt for some of these jurors. And I can tell you, when I'm seeing them writing during the trial, a lot of the things they're writing about are when the defense raises those questions on cross-examination about Joan Harmon and her boyfriend, William Stokes. And today we're learning that her boyfriend had some connections to first responders who were there in Pembroke who were initially on the scene of these crimes.
Wow, what great insight, Julia, because you're right. And it's unusual to see the defense and the Commonwealth both arguing for the same thing they were in this case. But bottom line, we do know that those two individuals do not have to testify based on the court's ruling. Julia Janae, thank you so much for joining us live. We'll look forward to your continuing coverage. The court is on a break for 15 minutes. While we have this opportunity, we will take a break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on the other side.
When COVID-19 attacked, America fought back. Frontline workers took action. U.S. manufacturers developed vaccines in record time. Now, we're getting back to work safely. But some in Washington just haven't learned, diminishing America's ability to develop life-saving cures and vaccines, imposing patient access restrictions, leaving us less prepared and more reliant on other nations. Tell Representative Bordeaux. Vote no on H.R. 3. Paid for by the National Association of Manufacturers.
We're gonna go deep.
We drove across the state to get here. We're working hard to get you the news you need.
We dig a little deeper on the stories of the day.
That's why we're here.
To help start making sense of it all.
Molly was an incredibly strong young woman.
Molly Tibbetts. She disappeared back in 2018. Her remains were found a month later in a cornfield.
Investigators focused on 25-year-old Christian Bravera.
He told us that's where we would find her. This is a fight for our daughter.
The murder case of Molly Tibbetts.
This is Court TV.
What a day it has been as we continue our gavel-to-gavel coverage.
Is there reasonable doubt? We'll find out.
Welcome back to Court TV Live.
Your front row seat to justice. Welcome to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice.
It's a busy day here at Court TV.
And it could go one way or the other.
You have to look at everything in this case.
He murdered our daughter.
Can you take the hose and squeeze it?
We are live in courtrooms across the country.
This is true crime all the time.
We continue our gavel-to-gavel coverage.
Jury selection is underway.
This is what I love to do.
Native women have told me that what you do when you raise a daughter is you prepare her for what to do when she's raised, not if, but when.
Why are we different than every other person? Why don't we have the justice everybody else does?
Welcome to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice.
It's a busy day here at Court TV.
And it could go one way or the other.
You have to look at everything in this case.
He murdered our daughter.
Can you take the hose and squeeze it?
We are live in courtrooms across the country.
This is true crime all the time.
We continue our gavel-to-gavel coverage.
Jury selection is underway.
This is what I love to do.
What do you think the future looks like?
We see the storms getting worse.
Bad news is, you're in prison.
More people are coming into VR every day. Are we in a killer robots arms race right now?
I'm Vinnie Politan. You know, I stood before a jury on both sides of the courtroom. First as a prosecutor, then as a defense attorney. But with Court TV, you're the jury. You see every moment of testimony.
Y'all know I didn't do this.
Every story unfold.
I'm sorry for my crime.
Until a verdict is rendered and justice is served.
The all-new Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
We're gonna go deep.
We drove across the state to get here. We're working hard to get you the news you need.
We dig a little deeper on the stories of the day
That's why we're here.
to help start making sense of it all.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. Thank you for joining us. Ashley Wilcott here with you this afternoon. We are continuing our live coverage of Kentucky versus Christian Martin. He goes by Chris or Kit, the defendant in this case. We are on a break. The court took a 15-minute recess, as is typical, and we are waiting for them to come back into the courtroom. As soon as they come back into court, certainly we will take you there. And I now have still with me Julia Janae, our Court TV legal correspondent, live there in Kentucky. Julia, tell me, I know that we just heard testimony from a deputy, and he is one who seized a gun out of a safe, a Glock. We saw that. They showed the Glock to the jury. How did the jury respond today? How have they been in general?
You know, I have to say, with these jurors, they have notepads, they have pens, but they really haven't been taking a lot of notes throughout. They've been seeing a lot of images, exhibits, evidence that's been put up on the screen. So I've noticed that they like to look and take things in that way. But when the defendants, basically the items that were inside of his safe were shown, the jury was very interested in that. They were taking notes.
All right, and we're going to go right back into court. The judge is on the bench. You can see the judge is on the bench. I understand that the jury is in the courtroom. We are waiting for the prosecutors to come in. Here she is. You can see on your screen they are arriving. We expect that testimony will continue.
Your next witness.
Detective Justin Meacham.
Swear the testimony you're about to give agrees with you and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. Thank you. Be seated.
Would you state your name, please?
It's Justin Meacham.
What is your occupation?
I'm a detective with the Christian County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been with the sheriff's office?
I've been a sworn deputy for approximately 7 years.
Were you working with the sheriff's office in April 2016?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you receive a call to go to the Phillips residence at 443 South Main
Yes, ma'am.
that day? What happened when you got to the house?
When I arrived at the residence, I made contact with Matt Phillips. Prior to my arrival, I was told that I was going to possibly be collecting a piece of evidence. When I got there, I made contact with Matt Phillips, who brought me into the back porch area and showed me a shell casing that they had located while cleaning the house.
Did you take photographs after he showed you the location?
Yes, ma'am.
If you would direct your attention to the screen. And what this photograph here is Commonwealth Exhibit 2, and show us, orient us in this photo where the casing was located.
Okay.
And you did take this photograph.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
This area right here is the back door of the porch that leads out to the backyard area. The shell casing is right in this area here.
And Commonwealth's Exhibit 3, again, where is the casing in this photograph?
In this photo, the casing is right there. Right there.
Commonwealth's Exhibit 5. Now, this is a different perspective. What is the door we see in this photograph on the upper right?
This door here,
Yes.
that is the entry door off of the porch into the residence.
From the porch into the residence.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so where's the casing there?
Casing here is right in this area here.
Commonwealth's Exhibit 6, another photograph. What door is this one here?
This was the back door leading to the backyard area, and the shell casing is in this area. This is just a different view from the first photo that you showed. That actually shows the door.
And that door leads to the backyard,
Yes, ma'am.
not the door that you come in from the driveway.
No, ma'am.
Commonwealth's Exhibit 7. What is this photograph?
This is a photograph of the location where the shell casing was found. It's right there, somewhat centered on the photo.
In Commonwealth's Exhibit 4, where is the casing in this photograph?
The casing's right there.
Now, you took these photographs before you collected the casing,
Yes, ma'am.
and then how did you collect it?
I placed it into a bag, an evidence bag.
Once again, if you direct your attention to the screen, and Commonwealth's Exhibit 13, able to open. There was a surveillance camera in the porch area, and that has already, clips of you collecting has already been admitted and shown to the jury. But would you explain, you collected it in a paper bag, and then what did you do?
From there, I believe I went and secured that in my vehicle.
Yeah, we do have the video. Is that you in the lower right as you're walking out?
Yes, ma'am.
And after you've already collected it and put it in the paper bag? I think this is a replay.
Yes, it would be in that bag.
You're holding the bag there,
Yes,
so to speak.
and that's me rolling the top of the bag over to secure that in there.
I'm pausing this video. Is this area right here the door that leads to the cellar?
Yes, ma'am, I believe that's the door there.
Okay.
Yes.
Detective, I'm going to hand you what is marked for identification as Commonwealth Exhibit 15 and ask you to examine the item in the bag. Is that the casing that you collected
Yes, ma'am.
and then took to the evidence room at the sheriff's office
Yes, ma'am.
and secured it?
Yes, ma'am.
During the time that you were on the porch and after you were shown and collected it, did you look around to determine if there was anything else that might be of significance in the area?
Yes, ma'am. After collecting the shell casing, I returned and just checked the immediate area where it had been located just to see if there may be anything else there. But I did not find any other evidence there at that time.
Okay. That's all questions. Thank you.
Cross?
Good afternoon, Detective. When you got to the scene at 443, can you remember who else was there?
I believe Matt's aunt, Diane or Diana.
And those are the only two other people other than yourself?
Yes, those are the only two that I remember when I was there.
So the state rep, Mr. Dossett, was no longer there when you got there?
I don't believe so. I don't believe I saw him there at all.
Okay. Prior to this, am I correct that you hadn't had any real contact with the case?
None.
None, okay.
You are correct.
Okay, thank you. So this was a surprise call. You were off working, doing something else when you got this call?
I was just working patrol, doing my regular shift.
Right. So you drove over here and you did what you were asked to do?
Yes, sir.
Which was collect potential evidence in the case?
Yes, sir.
And you've been trained on how to do that sort of thing, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's why you photographed the area, we saw the pictures, and you collected it in a way so that that you didn't change or mess with the evidence itself, right?
Correct.
Put it in that paper bag. And then you did what you were supposed to, which is to give it off to somebody else and probably send it to the lab.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And after that, am I right that that's also the end of your contact, other than coming here, other than testifying?
Yes, sir.
You didn't have any other contact with the case? But as far as that casing goes, which has been marked as Exhibit 15, you don't know how it got there.
No, sir.
You don't know who put it there.
No, sir.
You don't know how long it had been there before you went there that day.
No, sir.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
All right.
Nothing.
All right, thank you, Detective. You may step down.
Your Honor, may we approach?
You may.
Not surprisingly, that was very quick testimony from the deputy. He was called. Now remember, the aunt and son, the son of two of the victims in this case, were the ones who called and said, we found a casing in April of 2016. The incident occurred in November of 2015. So 5-6 months later, they called. This deputy responded. He took the casing, put it in an evidence bag, as he's required to do for chain of custody. That was the extent of his testimony. He doesn't know how it got there. He doesn't know anything about it other than he received the phone call. He went, he picked up, he collected that casing. Now, the defense asked to approach. I just want to note that during today, there have been a number of requests to approach the bench, and here they are again. We don't know what they're discussing or what comes next, but we're certainly just going to keep watching to see. All right, with me, I have former prosecutor, media law professor Walter Gabriel. Walter, we're going to talk while they're at the bench. We'll go back to court when they resume. But I just must ask you, I've just noticed more requests to approach, more conversations at the bench. What, if anything, does that mean to you?
Not sure what they're discussing here. As you suggested, they are approaching a lot. Maybe some evidence issues, but the defense apparently wrapped up its questioning of the investigator. I will say, though, I did expect the defense attorney to hone in more on this issue of the shell casing being discovered some months after the crime scene was initially investigated. The chain of custody questioning is normally a fairly routine and kind of glanced over part of a criminal trial, but there's a real concern that this shell casing was found some months afterwards, and it was found by a family member of the victim. So, I'm not sure. Maybe the defense knows where it intends to go next with another witness, and maybe it's seeking some guidance from the court on where it can and can't go with its next anticipated witness. That's my best guess. Normally, you don't see both sides approaching, though, after a witness has been excused from the stand. It's normally at some point in between when one side objects to some line of questioning. So my guess is as good as anyone's at this point.
And I feel like the tenor of the trial has shifted a little bit after the Commonwealth, or the prosecution, and the defense were on the same page, wanting to call two witnesses, and that is the ex-wife of the defendant in this case, as well as her son. And the judge ruled, they had an attorney, hired an attorney who came in and argued they should not have to testify, even though they've been subpoenaed, because the Fifth Amendment right, they don't want to incriminate themselves. And the judge actually ruled against the defense and the Commonwealth and said, nope, I'm going to agree they don't have to testify, that the questions are what we're looking at. It could lead to them incriminating themselves. And I feel like since that ruling, it's just been a little off kilter. What are your thoughts about the judge's ruling?
I'm a little bit surprised because it would appear to go against the defense's ability to mount its own case in defense of what their client is being charged with. I would expect, though, for the defense to hammer away at the fact that there's a witness they wanted to call who pled the Fifth, and if I were the defense on this case, I'd want those people to take the stand and plead the Fifth in front of the jury, just to give a face and a visual and something more for the jury to remember than a quick mention in passing that, oh, we wanted to call this person, but she elected to plead the Fifth. I think I'm surprised by the ruling. I'm sure there's support from Kentucky case law on that ruling, but I think it does hurt the defense that they can't call her and at least have her take the Fifth on the stand to some questions, but maybe answer others. It is a bit surprising, but I think it overall hurts the defense a bit.
Yeah, Walter, you make some really great points. I'm going to take this opportunity. Also joining us, we have Judge Tiffany Porter, who's also a criminal defense attorney. And again, I may break into this. If they go back into talking that we can hear, I'm going to go back to court. But here's the part of that Walter just said, and I completely agree, make them take the stand and then assert the Fifth. However, I heard during the arguments, I don't think I misheard, that someone argued, listen, if they take the stand, it's too late. Then they have to testify. What is your position about that, Judge Porter?
I don't believe that they would have to take this. I mean, that they would have, once taking the stand, that they would have to not invoke their rights, that it's already open. But I would suggest if I was their attorney, I would not allow them to take the stand. I think you are getting too close to the line, and if certain things come out, that may raise reasonable doubt with the jury. So as a defense attorney, I don't really think they should put them in there if there's any inkling that it may go the other way.
Agreed. Let me go back to court. It looks like we're resuming here.
I swear the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. Thank you. Have a seat.
Good afternoon. Can you please state your full name for the record?
James Michael Garrett.
Okay. And what is your current occupation?
I am an officer in the U.S. Army. My occupation is a judge advocate.
Okay. And explain to us what a judge advocate is.
It's an attorney.
And what's your current rank?
Major.
And Major, where are you currently stationed?
I'm stationed at Fort Hood, Texas.
Okay. And how long have you been in the military?
16 and a half years.
And some of that time has been as an attorney, correct?
Yes.
How much of that time?
Almost 10 years.
And so I assume you've been to multiple posts. In 2015, where was your post then?
I was stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
And what were some of your duties?
Well, I was there for 4 years, so I wore a lot of legal hats while I was there. Legal assistance, administrative law, trial counsel, special assistant U.S. attorney.
And you just mentioned trial counsel. Can you explain to the jurors what position that is?
Yes, trial counsel is a prosecutor, similar to Mr. Garcia. It's just in the military version.
Okay. And so you prosecute military crimes?
That's correct.
So in 2015, while you were at Fort Campbell, did you come across the defendant?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And in what way?
He was the subject of an investigation of mishandling classified information.
Okay. Was there another investigation?
Later there was. So I had recently gotten back from Afghanistan and had became a trial counsel, the prosecutor, and I had this case of mishandling classified information in which talking to witnesses led to further CID investigation, which led to other charges.
And we had heard about CID earlier, but can you explain to us what CID is?
Sure, it's the Criminal Investigative Division. It's basically the detectives for the military.
And so you mentioned that the defendant was subject of an investigation. What did that lead to?
It led to Uniform Code of Military Justice punishment. He was offered what is called an Article 15, which he declined and wanted to be court-martialed. And so that was the next step in UCMJ, which was to prepare for a court-martial.
And explain to the jurors what a court-martial is.
It's a trial similar to this, just in a military jurisdiction.
And in your capacity as the prosecutor in that case, did you talk to the victim in this trial, Calvin Phillips?
Yes, several times.
Okay. And in what way was your encounters with him?
Well, my first encounter was, when it was time to prepare for court-martial, he was one of the first people that I called. And because he was really the reason the classified information was turned in. He insisted upon it because he was prior military and he knew.
Judge, I object to your side.
Overruled. He was prior military and knew that discs labeled secret and classified should not be in someone's home. So he insisted on it being turned in to authorities. And I can continue because during that conversation, that initial conversation with Mr. Phillips, he also informed me of potential abuse of the stepson, which I was not aware of, and he was adamant about that potential and wanted to show me photos, which when he told me there were photos, I was certainly interested. And he said he could come to Fort Campbell and be there in 20 minutes. And so I met Mr. Phillips for the first time about 20 minutes later, at which we went into a conference room and he showed me 4 photos depicting abuse of the stepson.
And so the information that he provided you, did that lead to, I guess, another charge?
Yes, it did. That opened up a new investigation. We provided those photos to CID, who launched an investigation of abuse, and it did lead to other charges to include those photos that Mr. Phillips provided.
So how would you describe the information that Calvin Phillips had provided to you?
Essential. It's foundational. There would have been no court-martial without Calvin Phillips.
And how serious were the charges that the defendant was facing?
Well, they were very serious. The assault charges, included strangling of the stepson, which led to a verdict of assault consummated by a battery of a child under the age of 16. And that happened in Germany, approximately 2008. Then there was another charge.
Well, and let me stop you.
Sure.
And so as far as, I guess my question was, those charges, what would it have done to his military career?
It would have ended it, for sure.
And it would have opened him up to time, and what was the penalty range for those 2 charges?
The assault charges?
And the misuse of classified information.
So the 128, it's called an Article 128 assault. I believe that was a 2-year maximum punishment. The potential, it's the punitive exposure of 2 years. The mishandling classified information was charged as an Article 133, which is conduct unbecoming an officer, and that led to the punitive exposure for that is 1 year, or I believe it's worded 1 year, or as deemed appropriate.
And again, I want to ask, as the defendant who was an officer at the time with 20 years of service, how serious were those charges against him in his career? Judge asked and answered.
Overruled.
Well, devastating to his career. And their criminal charges, so devastating for his career as well as potential having a criminal record.
And we've previously have heard of the statement of so at some point in 2015 was a trial set, a date set for the defendant's court-martial?
Yes, there were several dates set. There were several continuances in this trial. I think the original date was in January timeframe of 2015. The military judge granted the continuance until, I believe, April. There was another defense request for continuance that I think the next date was October, and then December 1st, it looked like we were finally a go for the court-martial.
And was Calvin Phillips set to testify against the defendant on that day?
Yes.
Okay. And was the defendant aware that Calvin Phillips was set to testify against him on that day?
Yes.
Okay.
We had disclosed it in our witness list. They had known for months. And if I could back up for 1 second, the dates that they were, I think, January, April, August, October, and then December. I'm not sure if I mentioned August, but there were several continuances.
When did you become aware that Calvin Phillips had been murdered?
I learned the next afternoon, late in the afternoon, November 19th. I was at CID doing final preparations for our trial that was upcoming. And I then learned of an email from the defendant's attorney, his defense counsel at the time, a rather inappropriate email that was notifying us.
Judge, I would object, and I want it to be clear that it's not me.
Yes, I think that motion is, or objection is sustained.
Okay.
And jury's admonished the email that the Major is referring to was not from any of these lawyers. That's correct, isn't it?
That is absolutely correct, Judge.
What we were getting at is whose attorneys, not these attorneys, but what attorneys?
Yeah, his attorneys at the time, his name was Mr. Bill Phillips. He sent a note to us.
Judge, I object to you.
Yes, again, I don't think we need to know anything about the contents of the email.
Okay.
The fact that you received it, that's how you were notified of the witness's demise, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
And then, of course, we confirmed it with CID because that email was not clear. So
that's fine. Okay.
We've confirmed it, whether it was true or not.
So when was, prior to the 19th, when was the last time you had contact with Calvin Phillips?
November 5th, about 13 days prior to his death.
And did you have a conversation with him on that day?
I did.
Okay. And what about?
Judge, we object either side.
Overruled. Subject of the hearing again.
So Mr. Phillips had left a voicemail that I returned that call, and he expressed concern about what the defendant might do. And he took, Mr. Phillips was a talker. He said a lot whenever you talked to him, had a great sense of humor, but the last couple of months leading up to the December 1st trial, The tension was building in the neighborhood. He was relaying to me that he was concerned about what the defendant might do. He said that he was...
And that's fine, we could leave it at that.
Okay.
And after that November 5th conversation, did you speak with him again?
No.
In your preparation for the court-martial of the defendant, did you become aware of the defendant's military career
Yes.
and his background?
Yes.
And what was his background?
Well, he'd served a long time. He'd served as an attack helicopter pilot and had gone to Ranger School, and he was well versed in combat arms.
To you, as an officer, what does it mean to be dishonorably discharged?
Judge, I object. Sustained.
And so when was the trial or the court-martial ultimately, when did it take place?
It finally took place in May of 2016.
And ultimately, what was the punishment that the defendant received?
The defendant received a dismissal and 90 days in prison at Leavenworth and total forfeitures.
And obviously, Calvin Phillips did not testify, correct?
That's correct.
And for the December 2nd court-martial, December 1st of 2015 court-martial, where Calvin Phillips was set to testify as a witness for the government, was Joan Harmon set to testify on that day as a witness for the government?
We had listed her as a witness, but our strategy was not to utilize Joan Harmon.
No further questions, John.
One second.
Afternoon.
Afternoon.
The prosecution asked you some of the questions I was going to ask, actually. So, let's see. Obviously, you were the prosecutor in the court-martial.
Yes, I was one of them. There were three of us, but I was the lead prosecutor.
Okay. lead prosecutor. You had a team of
Yes.
folks. I think you told us the court-martial was reset multiple times. If I counted right, I may have counted wrong. You counted wrong the first time, I think you had another one. Is it 5 dates total? Is that, I'm not trying to exaggerate, that seems like what you said, with the final date being in May 2016?
Oh, well, there were a couple of more continuances after the triple homicide. So it didn't go from December to May.
Okay.
It went, there was, and I don't remember what those dates were, but there was another continuance or 2.
Okay, so I said 5, but it might be more like even 7 dates.
Maybe.
Okay. You told us there was maybe some arguments and disputes about whether or not it was actually going to be a court-martial or you say it was Article 15, did I get the number right?
It's called Article 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's because there's a choice that people can elect sometimes as to whether or not to do an Article 15 or whether to have a full court-martial?
Well, an Article 15 is offered by the command, and the person who receives that offer can either accept it or demand trial by court-martial.
Okay. That's what I was trying to say a second ago. So there's, in this case, in the court-martial, when I say this case, I'm talking about your case. There was a lot of back and forth. Is that fair? A lot of arguments?
That's fair.
Pre-trial?
Yes.
One of the arguments was about whether or not the case should have been court-martial or Article 15, and there were hearings about it and all sorts of stuff, right? Do you remember that, or is that too far back?
I don't remember hearings about it being whether it should be an Article 15 or not. Once charges were preferred, it was a court-martial. The Article 15 was off the table.
So you don't remember actually some hearings about whether or not it went to court-martial without an opportunity for an Article 15?
No, I remember there being a hearing in September, but that is not the
September
of 2014. No, 2015, okay. Shortly before the triple homicide. That's the hearing I recall.
Well, there are some other hearings. There was a complaint that was made about you, right?
And that's what that hearing was about.
Right. And there was, I may have the title of this wrong, a congressional inquiry? What's that called? Did I get the title wrong?
It's a congressional,
isn't it called in the military a congressional?
Yes.
All right. And there was a congressional, right, in this case?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And that's basically a complaint about the way the case is being brought, right?
It can be. I mean, soldiers can file congressionals for a number of things. Okay. But that did occur, and I'm sure I think that's what it was about.
Okay. And it was a complaint about you?
I don't recall what the congressional was about.
But you do remember the other complaint about you with the big hearing?
Yeah, and it wasn't just about me.
Objection, Your Honor.
It was
Relevance.
Overruled.
the defense complaint was about all of the government prosecutors as well as the commander of Fort Campbell. So it was a rather broad complaint.
You said you weren't you knew that Joan Harmon was part of this case, right?
Yes.
And Joan Harmon got financial assistance from your office, right?
No, that's not true.
She didn't request financial assistance from your office?
She did not. As a matter of fact, we informed her that she did not qualify because the defendant was making those assertions in the public forum, and we wanted to clarify for her in case there was any misunderstanding that she did not qualify for any benefits associated with being a victim or a potential victim.
But you did assist her, right? At least you called some people on her behalf. You remember that?
I was told to call when you're referring to when she was being prosecuted, right? And I called the attorneys.
When you say you called the attorneys, who did you call?
I believe it was Catherine Garber Foster. I think that's her name. It's been a long time.
Your Honor, may we approach? I think that's a good idea.
This has been a really interesting day to watch, and all the approaching of the judge and the objections and the testimony of this particular witness. Walter Gabriel, former prosecutor, media law professor, is still with us to help break this down. Well, why do you think they wanted to approach at that point? I mean, they're asking all about Joan Harmon and whether or not the office gave her money, offered her assistance. Where's this going?
Well, it seems like the defense is trying to get at some sort of bias on the part of Ms. Harmon. And it looks like the judge advocate, who's basically the military prosecutor, kind of blurted out something that the prosecution in this case didn't expect him to state, that he called the attorneys, apparently, on behalf of Ms. Harmon. I'm kind of learning this at the same moment as everyone else. The prosecution objected right before. It looks like the defense lawyer was a bit surprised when he got that testimony from the judge advocate, paused a bit himself, and then said, well, what did you do? Who'd you call? And at that response, the state then requested to be at this bench conference. So I imagine they're getting at how far into detail that they can, the defense can question this witness. Now, this witness opened the door to this line of questioning, and we'll see, or maybe we won't see, what the judge decides on how far the defense can go under this line of questioning. But at the end of the day, the defense wants to get at some sort of bias or motive on the part of Ms. Harmon in her potential testimony against the defendant who's on trial here. So seemed like a bit of a surprise and a bit of a benefit to the defense, what the judge advocate who's testifying just stated.
And I had to laugh when you said that he looked surprised, because I too felt like the defense attorney was like, wow, wait, okay, I didn't expect that answer. Let me see where I can take that now, because this is good information potentially for the defense. And what's interesting to me, though, the prosecution did open the door, because the prosecution specifically asked about Joan Harmon. He walked over to the other prosecutor, Ms. Whaley, and, anything else I need to ask, then went back to the direct examination and said, was Joan Harmon a witness in this case? And the witness said yes, listed as a witness, but the strategy was probably not to call her. So interesting to me that I feel like Joan Harmon, we know the judge has said, because of her Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate herself, is not allowed to testify, doesn't have to testify, but they sure are getting her in through this witness. Let's see what happens.
You told us a second ago that you called someone on Joan Harmon's behalf. And then I asked you who, and you told me, I think.
Catherine Garber Foster, I believe is her name.
Okay. And who did Catherine Garber Foster work for?
She worked for the Commonwealth Attorney's Office there in Hopkinsville.
And you called because they were prosecuting Joan?
Yes.
And you called on her behalf?
No, I called to let them know that we were prosecuting Kip Martin, and wanted to make sure that they knew that, because they were relying on him to bring about those charges. So wanted to just level the bubbles between legal offices, which, as part of the complaint, the judge says is perfectly normal between different legal offices to do.
All right. Let's talk for a minute. You already told us that the number of days in jail that Mr. Martin received at the end of the court martial was 90 days, right?
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the court martial. When we're talking about Calvin Phillips, in the court martial case is someone who had provided physical evidence to, and I'm inclined to say you, but it's you, the CID and the prosecutorial office, right?
Yes.
Okay. And he supplied two different types of physical evidence. One was disks, computer stuff. I'm counting that as one type, okay? Would you agree with me? That was supplied, yes?
Not to us. He turned it into the FBI, but it made its way to us, yes.
That's my point. I'm trying to cut out the middleman a little bit with my questions. And the other was that he provided you with some photos, right?
Correct.
Of Justin Harmon, right?
Yes.
Who was his teenage stepson, correct?
Yes.
And those showed injuries primarily to his back.
It was his back, shoulders, arms. I think it was charged face, back, chest, arms, and shoulders.
Okay. But there wasn't any eyewitness, beyond providing those things, Calvin Phillips was not an eyewitness to any of the charges against Mr. Martin.
That's true. That's correct.
Okay. He was effectively a chain of custody witness in your case.
In trial, but we wouldn't have known about these at all but for Calvin Phillips.
Sure, I'm talking about the actual court martial.
Right.
Court martial. And in both of those situations, the objects that he provided to you came from his interaction with Joan Harmon, right?
Well, the disc came from his personal interaction at the home that he saw himself.
When he was helping Joan
He was
Harmon.
helping Joan move out.
Right.
Yes.
And then the photos were actually given to him by Joan Harmon.
That's my understanding.
Well, that's the understanding that you used to introduce all of those materials into the court martial, right? All the items that we're talking about were introduced into the court martial.
Yes.
There was no problem with chain of custody in the court martial, right?
Right. Because Joan was with him when he turned it in both times, so we had her instead of him.
Joan, you jump right to my very next question. Joan was called by you to testify at the court martial. And all of those items of evidence came in.
That's correct.
Okay. One sec. One of the things that Calvin told you in that phone conversation that you talked about, you said he talked about a bunch of things, right? I think you said he was a talker.
Yes.
One of the things he told you is that the investigators, the court-martial investigators for his court-martial defense team had been to interview him again, right?
Can you say that again?
I asked it horribly. But one of the things he told you was that he had had another interview with the defense investigators.
So the private investigators, we had a previous conversation about that on, I believe, the 2nd. My last conversation on the 5th was not regarding that.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, but you had a few days earlier had a conversation with him where he told you that, okay.
Correct.
And just, again, to clarify, we're not talking about anybody who works for me, right? We're talking about...
That's right.
Okay. The prosecution asked you about something, but they didn't show it to you. I'm going to show it to you. It's item 152. Thank you. Sorry, yes, I need an envelope. Okay, this has previously been marked. I'm going to bring the envelope with me so it doesn't get displaced. Been previously marked Exhibit 152. Could you look at it for 1 sec? I think you'll recognize it.
Okay.
Does that look familiar with something that comes into your regular line of duty?
Yes.
All right, what is it?
It's subpoenas.
Okay. And in particular, that's a subpoena for Calvin Phillips, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, subpoenas work a little bit different in the military. I didn't know this. Just found this out. In the military, the defense actually can't issue a subpoena, right? That's not the procedure.
Right.
In our court, I can have a subpoena issued, right? I or somebody on the defense team can issue a subpoena, but that's not true in the military, right?
Correct.
In the military, the procedure is that all subpoenas are actually issued by the prosecution, right?
Well, they request the government to produce the witnesses, and we either grant or deny that. And if a witness is denied that the defense thinks is imperative, they can go to the court and go to the judge.
Okay.
Yeah, but
So
yes, we do approve, we grant or deny based off the proffer that they provide for what the testimony might be.
And I'm gonna just make sure, sometimes lawyers talk like lawyers. That was a little bit of a lawyery answer.
Sorry.
Okay. So I just want to make sure it's clear. In the military, the attorneys who represent someone, or the attorneys who represent Mr. Martin, cannot simply go issue a subpoena.
Right.
They would have to put in a document, a pleading, I'm going to call it a pleading, but a legal document that was filed, a list of people. You just said it, but I'm going to say it again anyway. They put a list of people that they're asking you to subpoena, right?
That's right.
And then you just told me something I didn't know either, which is that if you deny it, in theory, there's some sort of appellate remedy, right? But that's not normal. The normal way is the defense attorneys would write up their list, and then they'd send it to you, right? And then you would either agree and issue a subpoena, or you would deny and tell them why you're denying.
And of course, this has to do with the government producing them. The defense can produce anyone on their own without asking us to produce them. So a local witness that is for the defense, they don't have to ask us to produce. But if they want to ensure the person is there for whatever reason, then
subpoena.
Yeah.
Right. That's.
But of course, we used a subpoena for him for government purposes.
Sure. Sure. But in this court-martial, in Mr. Martin's court-martial, in fact, the defense filed one of those pleadings and asked you to produce certain witnesses, right?
That's right.
And when they filed that list and said, these are the witnesses the defense needs at the court-martial, one of those witnesses was Calvin Phillips.
Correct.
In fact, one of the things that we received in discovery is all the records from the court-martial. I have marked these Defense Exhibit 1A and 2A.
stuff super organized. It's in volume 13 of the court martial. Your Honor, may I approach the witness? I'm handing you two documents that you will recognize. What I have marked as Defense Exhibit 1A is the request by the defense. Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Can you look through the witnesses listed and tell the jury, do you see Calvin Phillips listed as a requested defense witness?
I do.
Now I'd like you to turn your attention to Defense Exhibit 2A. Do you recognize that, sir?
I do.
All right. That is your response.
Correct.
Could you review your response for a second? Unless you have a memory.
I know what it says.
All right. Well, then I'll cut to the chase. Did you, in fact, agree to produce Calvin Phillips as a defense witness in your response?
I did.
Okay. And when I say your response, the reason I'm calling it your response is because you signed it.
I sure did.
All right. The defense request is in August of 2015. That look right?
That's right.
And your response is not long after that, right? Also, I believe in August, it's either in late August or early September, you're holding it.
It's just 3 days later.
3 days later. Good turnaround. When someone is subpoenaed like that, do they get one subpoena? And I'm going to use the term crossover witness because I think you used that term, right? Is that a term you guys use?
I did not use that term. But...
All right, then I won't use it for you either, right? When someone is subpoenaed like this, would they get one subpoena or two?
One.
All right. Thank you. I have no further questions.
On the December 1st court-martial, you weren't planning to call Joe Martin, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, it was just Calvin Phillips who was set to testify.
That's right.
You were asked questions about Calvin Phillips being subpoenaed by the government, correct?
Yes.
So you initially subpoenaed Calvin Phillips before anyone else?
That's correct.
And if the defense was aware of that prior to their request for him?
Right.
And you talk about when a defense requests someone's appearance, they give a proffer?
Yes, and that just means they describe, what they anticipate the person will testify to.
And so in the proffer, it wasn't that Calvin was set to testify for the defendant. What were his requests for?
It was to discredit him. So, and I just, would like to add, it's important really that when we do these exchanges of requests for witnesses, that if it's a witness that we are definitely producing, like Mr. Calvin Phillips, then we say granted for the defense request for that person to be there. That's why my response was one word, granted, because we were producing Calvin Phillips, and he was a government witness. That's common practice. We're not going to argue about whether or not he should be there as a defense witness when he's going to be there regardless. And then this document has a lot more other names of which there's an actual argument about whether they're going to be produced by the government or not based off of the anticipated testimony. So, yes, we granted Calvin Phillips because we were bringing him no matter what, because he was that important to us.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Counsel, I want to see you all at the bench, please.
All right, while they're at the bench, I would like to take this opportunity, Tiffany Porter, Municipal Court Judge, Criminal Defense Attorney, I have to bring you in and ask you, on direct examination specifically, there was testimony from this witness. There would have been no court-martial without Calvin Phillips, one of the victims of a murder in this case, and that these charges would have been devastating to the defendant's career. Do you think that was enough to prove motive and beyond a reasonable doubt to the jury?
I think it was enough to prove motive, but not beyond a reasonable doubt. I think when they kept going into the information about the court-martial, I don't really believe that it was helping them, in my opinion. They weren't able to get enough out without going over to the hearsay violations. And I don't think it really helped them. It could show motive, but that's it.
How do you think that this witness performed on direct examination versus cross-examination? Did you notice a little bit of a different demeanor during cross?
I did. He shifted. He was very stoic with the prosecutors, and he just seemed like he was just straightforward, not giving anything extra. And excuse me, I said with the prosecutors, but with the defense, he was very, to the point, yes, no, and not really willing to give forth any other information.
All right, thank you. They're breaking up. I know, Tiffany, that you are going to be leaving us. We thank you so much for joining us. Let's go back to court and see what's happened.
He is going to ask that.
One last question, Major. The sentence that Mr. Martin received, you have mentioned 90 days, and that he was dismissed. Dismissed from what?
He was dismissed from the Army. It's what is given to an officer rather than dishonorable discharge for enlisted personnel. It's called a dismissal for officers. And it has a huge effect on your benefits. Would you like me to expound upon that?
No, I think that's plain.
No, Your Honor.
Anything else of this witness?
And that's what the jury, so when he was, the sentence, is that what the jury had found, or is that what he was sentenced to by the judge?
The panel, it's called a panel in the military, but it's a jury, and that's what they came back with.
The jury imposes a sentence.
It depends, Your Honor, on whether it's a judge alone trial or, so it just depends.
All right, thank you. Anything else of this witness?
No further questions, Your Honor.
Very well.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Major. Thank you for your service. All right, it's 5 o'clock, almost on the dot. We're going to, boy, that is one noisy gate. He obviously isn't as adept with it as the locals because they know not to let it slam. Good job, guys. All right. We're finished for the day, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take our evening break at this time. Please remember the court's admonition, and I'm sure you've been observing it scrupulously, and I have no reason to doubt that you will continue to do so. We will resume court in the morning at 9 o'clock, and if you would please assemble in, I'm talking like I know where you assemble. I don't. Are you meeting out in the lobby? Is that where you sit? Is that where you have them, Sergeant? Yes, sir. All right. We'll just go to your usual spot, and we will send for you when we're ready to have you resume your responsibilities listening to the witnesses. If everyone would please allow the jurors to leave the courtroom first. Thank you. All right, everyone, we've had a long, busy day. I hope you can enjoy your evening, and we will see you in the morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you.
Court is adjourned for the day in Kentucky versus Christian Martin. They resume at 9 a.m. in the morning. We are going to let you have a short break as well. We will be right back on the other side with our continuing live coverage here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Welcome to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice.
It's a busy day here at Court TV, and it could go one way or the other.
You have to look at everything in this case.
He murdered our daughter.
Did you take the hose and squeeze it?
We are live in courtrooms across the country.
This is true crime all the time.
We continue our gavel-to-gavel coverage.
Jury selection is underway.
This is what I love to do.
When COVID-19 attacked, America fought back. Frontline workers took action. U.S. manufacturers developed vaccines in record time. Now, we're getting back to work safely. But some in Washington just haven't learned, diminishing America's ability to develop life-saving cures and vaccines, imposing patient access restrictions, leaving us less prepared and more reliant on other nations. Tell Representative Bordeaux. Vote no on H.R. 3. Paid for by the National Association of Manufacturers.
Race, psychology, technology, reality. Video games are changing the world in ways you may not realize. Newsy presents Next Level, now streaming.
Newsy cuts through the division, the
confusion, the uncertainty, empowering you with the facts and context you need to make informed decisions. Newsy. Be informed, not influenced.
We're gonna go deep.
We drove across the state to get here. We're working hard to get you the news you need.
We dig a little deeper on the stories of the day
That's why we're here.
to help start making sense of it all.
Welcome to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice.
It's a busy day here at Court TV.
And it could go one way or the other.
You have to look at everything in this case.
He murdered our daughter.
Did you take the hose and squeeze it?
We are live in courtrooms across the country.
This is true crime all the time.
We continue our gavel-to-gavel coverage.
Jury selection is underway.
This is what I love to do.
I'm Vinnie Politan. You know, I stood before a jury on both sides of the courtroom. First as a prosecutor, then as a defense attorney. But with Court TV, you're the jury. You see every moment of testimony.
Y'all know I didn't do this.
Every story unfold
I'm sorry for my crime.
until a verdict is rendered and justice is served.
The all-new Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
What do you think the future looks like?
We see the storms getting worse.
Bad news is, you're in prison.
More people are coming into VR every day. Are we in a killer robots arms race right now?
Native women have told me that what you do when you raise a daughter is you prepare her for what to do when she's raised, not if, but when.
Why are we different than every other person? Why don't we have the justice everybody else does?
What do you think the future looks like?
We see the storms getting worse.
Bad news is, you're in prison.
More people are coming into VR every day. Are we in a killer robots arms race right now?
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott, privileged to be with you. It has been a very busy day here on Court TV, where we are inside of two different courtrooms. In California, testimony continues in the Robert Durst Jinks murder trial. And in Kentucky, we just completed day 3 of testimony in the Commonwealth of Kentucky versus Christian Kit Martin. The former Army Ranger and commercial airline pilot is accused of killing his 3 neighbors, Cal and Pam Phillips, as well as Ed Dunsero. Today, the jury heard from the Army Judge Advocate General, who was in charge of Chris Martin's court-martial for mishandling of classified information and also for alleged abuse of Joan Harmon and her son.
So how would you describe the information that Calvin Phillips had provided to you?
Essential, it's foundational. There would have been no court-martial without Calvin Phillips.
And how serious were the charges that the defendant was facing?
Well, they were very serious. The assault charges, included strangling of the stepson, which led to a verdict of assault consummated by a battery of a child under the age of 16. And that happened in Germany, approximately 2008.
Still with us, former prosecutor Walter Gabriel. Walter, that quote, there would have been no court-martial without Calvin Phillips. To me, that certainly goes to motive. What was your takeaway from this testimony?
That was very important testimony. The Judge Advocate General laid that out, I thought, pretty clearly, that he was very essential to their prosecution, that it would have been devastating to Calvin Phillips' career if if Mr. Phillips were still alive and available to testify. I do think that the defense eventually muddied up the water somewhat when they termed Calvin Phillips as a chain of custody witness and tried to minimize it by stating that the defense also had subpoenaed Mr. Phillips to appear at trial. But at the end of the day, though, I do think that testimony got across well enough to the jury. I think they could have explained in a bit more detail what a court-martial does to a person's career and identity as a person who had served in the military. But I think it was impactful enough.
You know, I also wrote down exactly what you say, that basically Calvin would have been a chain of custody witness at trial. The other thing that they brought out on cross-examination that I made note of was that, listen, Joan Harmon was called to testify, and it is because of her that the pictures did come in after all. So I felt like you could take that one step further and say, okay, Joan Harmon wasn't murdered or killed in this case. And so, you know, why can you say that this is the reason or the person who actually murdered Calvin Phillips? I do want to listen, because you just mentioned talking about what it would do to the defendant's career. I'd like to listen to what the witness said about that when he testified.
Those charges, what would it have done to his military career?
It would have ended it, for sure.
And it would have opened him up to time and what was the penalty range for those two charges?
The assault charges?
And the misuse of classified information.
So the 128, it's called an Article 128 assault. I believe I know that was a 2-year maximum punishment. The potential, it's the punitive exposure of 2 years. The mishandling classified information was charged as an Article 133, which is conduct unbecoming an officer, and that led to the punitive exposure for that is 1 year, or I believe it's worded 1 year, or as deemed appropriate.
Joining us now, Court TV legal correspondent Julia Janae, who again is in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, covering this trial live. When they pan the courtroom, I see you sitting in the courtroom. I felt like this was very compelling testimony. Tell us about how it sounded in person and how the jury reacted.
It really seemed like this jury had a lot of respect for what was coming from the witness stand from this major in the Army. They were a little bit more attentive than we saw with the other witnesses. It seemed like they knew this was going to be very important. I saw a lot more note writing during this witness, and they specifically were writing down those details about this court-martial, Cal Phillips being that all-important witness, but also writing down some of those details about the sentencing that the defendant would get or did get, the 90 days in jail and a dismissal from the Army that they wanted to clarify was not a dishonorable discharge, but was a dismissal.
And I think it was very smart for the questioner to ask and clarify that. What exactly is a dismissal? And as I understood it, he said, basically that's what an officer receives versus enlisted receives a dishonorable discharge. So I felt like it made very clear it's not a good thing, right? It wasn't a good career thing for the defendant in this case to have that type of sentence decided by the panel, which is the equivalent of a jury, but in the military setting. Julia, what were the other takeaways did you feel? And did the witness's demeanor change as much as I felt like it changed between the direct examination and cross-examination?
It did seem to be just a bit more contentious on the defense side, but I think overall you just felt a lot of the military feel from this witness. He's probably been in a lot of the court-martial proceedings, and in this one you just felt all of that coming from him on the witness stand. He was looking at these jurors, connecting with them, seeming like he wanted to explain things to them, understanding that they may not be familiar with a court-martial proceeding and what the differences are. I thought he could have done a little bit better, or the prosecution could have pulled out a little better, why Cal Phillips would have been their star witness and not Joan Harmon. These were allegations that stem not only from her son and her own allegations against the defendant, but also the fact that that top secret disc with the classified information was found in a home that she was living in, that Calvin Phillips noticed it while he was with her and moving things out of a home that he and his wife had helped her get. So you would think that in a typical trial that you'd want your witness, your initial witness, to be the one taking the stand, and then you have supporting witnesses. But perhaps it was different for this court-martial case. Perhaps they felt that Calvin Phillips, being a veteran himself, was a more credible witness on the stand. That may have been something that these jurors could definitely benefit from hearing, especially now that they are not going to hear from Joan Harmon at all.
Gosh, Julia, you make a great point, because you're right. It was in her home. She certainly saw it, could have been a very good witness. And I agree with you. The more information they know about the Joan Harmon piece, given they're not going to hear from her, probably the better. I'd like to shift gears a little bit, because prior to the witness we just heard from, it was the deputy with the sheriff's office who really was chain of custody, but responded to the call in April of 2016 when the casing was found by the aunt and son of the victims, Calvin and Pamela Phillips. Tell us a little bit about that testimony and what he had to say about the casing.
Well, Detective Meacham is a very important witness. He was not on the stand for very long, but he is the one who was called to the home of Calvin Phillips and Pamela Phillips when his son, Matt Phillips, and his sister, Diana Phillips, were there cleaning the home out. There's surveillance video of what happened. We know that they first called their state representative, Myron Dossett, who was there for some time before Detective Meacham, that you see there, actually arrived to the home. But you saw him looking at this shell casing, taking those photos. That's what he testified to on the stand, and also bagging it up, making sure that it was now going into evidence, wouldn't be contaminated. And it supported the idea, or the testimony that we've heard previously from Matt Phillips, the son, on the stand, that they did not touch it, that they immediately got law enforcement involved, and that cures, in the prosecution's position, that chain of custody issue. But of course, the defense saying, how did it get here? You don't know, Detective Meacham. And that is one of the things that they are hammering home for this jury, trying to raise that reasonable doubt.
Right. And I don't think there was any surprising testimony. I think that's probably what we expected from that witness. But tell us again the mood of the courtroom, and how did the jury react listening to this testimony? And again, getting to see physical evidence, the envelope with the casing that the witness was looking at.
They are a very attentive jury, but they don't give a lot of emotional responses. They are not wearing masks, so we can see their faces. They are paying attention. We did see earlier in the day one of the women who's on the far right side. She is often taking the most notes, but she seemed to not be paying as close attention during some of that first responder testimony earlier in the day. But they are definitely taking more notes, like I said, with the major, but also when those items were listed earlier from one of the detectives of what was found in the home of Christian Martin. They were writing those items down, especially what was in that safe, the ammunition, the .45 Glock, and the magazine. And they essentially, that .45 Glock ties to that casing that Detective Meacham was able to tell this jury about.
All right, Julia Janae, thank you so much for your continuing excellent coverage there from the ground. I know that we expect court to resume at 9 a.m. tomorrow. We'll look forward to providing that continuing coverage. In the meantime, Robert Durst, the trial out of California, has resumed. We are going to give you a short break. When we come back, we'll provide you our continuing gavel-to-gavel coverage here on Court TV Live.
When COVID-19 attacked, America fought back. Frontline workers took action. U.S. manufacturers developed vaccines in record time. Now, we're getting back to work safely. But some in Washington just haven't learned, diminishing America's ability to develop life-saving cures and vaccines, imposing patient access restrictions, leaving us less prepared and more reliant on other nations. Tell Representative Bordeaux. Vote no on H.R. 3. Paid for by the National Association of Manufacturers.
Welcome to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice.
It's a busy day here at Court TV.
And it could go one way or the other.
You have to look at everything in this case.
He murdered our daughter.
Can you take the hose and squeeze it?
We are live in courtrooms across the country.
This is true crime all the time.
We continue our gavel-to-gavel coverage.
Jury selection is underway.
This is what I love to do.
You know, this is the evil part of it all.
An all-new true crime series.
It was justifiable homicide.
I swung the hammer and I hit her.
And I just fired the gun.
This is the whole truth
Couldn't keep my life straight.
behind the true crime.
Something wicked this way comes. Something wicked this way comes.
Judgment with Ashley Banfield. All new episodes Sunday nights at 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
I'm Vinnie Politan. You know, I stood before a jury on both sides of the courtroom. First as a prosecutor, then as a defense attorney. But with Court TV, you're the jury. You see every moment of testimony.
Y'all know I didn't do this.
Every story unfold.
I'm sorry for my crime.
Until a verdict is rendered and justice is served.
The all-new Court TV. Your front row seat to justice.
Native women have told me that what you do when you raise a daughter is you prepare her for what to do when she's raped, not if, but when.
Why are we different than every other person? Why don't we have the justice everybody else does?
I'm Vinnie Politan. You know, I stood before a jury on both sides of the courtroom. First as a prosecutor, then as a defense attorney. But with Court TV, you're the jury. You see every moment of testimony.
Y'all know I didn't do this.
Every story unfold.
I'm sorry for my crime.
Until a verdict is rendered and justice is served.
The all-new Court TV. Your front row seat to justice.
Like what you're seeing from Newsy? Maybe you have a suggestion. Well, we want to hear from you. You can get in touch with us at feedback@newsy.com anytime. Newsy, be informed, not influenced.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. Judge Ashley Wilcott, honored to be with you. We're going to take you now to the second trial that we have been covering because they are back live in court in California versus Robert Durst. Now, the person that you are seeing testifying, it's a conditional examination of Charles Lockman, who at one time interviewed the defendant in person.
Phillips that handled the Kennedy divorce. She had a good friend there. Against everything I tried to say, Kathy switched attorneys and went to Milbank Tweed.
And that last statement you read, is that a quote from Mr. Durst?
I believe so.
Please continue.
Well, there's a closed quote at the end of Milbank Tweed. And it says, he says that when they determined there was little involved, if I may go back for a second, I think little involved is in quotes. Monetarily, the case wound its way down to lower echelon lawyers. Quote, as they found out there was little involved, what I own is held up in trust, close quote. Dale Smolin, pretty much her first case. She got married and became Dale Reagan. A large part of the problem is that Kathy and the postnuptial accord, quote, I felt like we were getting close, close quote. That's where Gilberta Najami has been coming from. She doesn't hesitate to say anything. I hope that a New York paper would.
That was again Mr. Durst speaking.
I believe so.
Please continue.
pull the paper.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what you're looking for. I'll get better as we get next page, I promise.
Jan 16, I don't remember what happened. Saturday, parentheses, MO dash, presumably meaning January 16th, close parentheses, we were in Denver. January 16 is a Sat. If she checked into Jacoby Hospital, we were never in Denver at cousin's wedding, Friday afternoon, and went Sunday.
Yes, as we were in Denver.
Sorry, my apologies. Sorry, sir. Sorry. That's absurd. Totally absurd. A weekend of there are a dozen parentheses of witnesses, close parentheses. Kathy hurt her knees. She fell down and hurt her knees out jogging, ellipsis, parentheses, or walking the dog, close parentheses. That is only time she could have been hospitalized.
That was Mr. Durr speaking.
I believe so.
At the time, having reviewed this, does it appear, Mr. Lockman, that you were aware or had information about an alleged hospitalization involving Kathy Durst on January 16th at Jacoby Hospital?
Yes.
And in terms of that January 16th date, then Mr. Durst is responding that that could not have been the date, could not have been hospitalized because they were in Denver. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Is there any indication that you asked him about a hospitalization at Jacoby Hospital on January 6th?
I don't have an indication based on these notes.
So, is it fair to say then that you are, in your question, presupposing an incident that happened on a certain date, and then Mr. Durst is responding to you about that date? Is that correct?
I believe so.
All right. Please continue. Did you get to the end of this page? Did you read the hospitalized part? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted a divorce unless we were post-marital, post-nuptial agreement. Quote, my wife sought a divorce in May of '80 and decided she didn't want a divorce. I felt I wasn't about to go through it again. I insisted we work out an agreement so that in the future, if my wife wanted to divorce me, parentheses, wouldn't have to go through the legal hassles and disclosures, close parentheses. November '80 until Jan '82, working on the post-nuptial agreement. Kathy absolutely did not want a divorce. She wanted to be happily married. It's very, very unpleasant making a disclosure, ellipsis, making financial disclosures if your family has assets and trusts. None of that stuff is disclosed out of the family since my uncle got divorced 25 years ago. We had a big argument about it. I went and made financial disclosures, gave out documents, which I was, the title here, I believe it says very hesitant to give out because I have to bring in family attorneys and family counsel. And it was just, you gotta go ahead and resolve this thing. His family gave him advice, colon, as a result of marrying you, she's going to college, she's going to medical school. That was more or less resolved.
Is the area you just read that started with I want their divorce and ended with that was more or less resolved, was that all Bob Durst quotes you?
I believe so.
Please continue.
Prudence Farrow, quote, my wife and I didn't live together from May or June of '80 until she moved into my Riverside Drive apartment in April. I can't read the date. Bear with me a moment. During that time, we both had relationships, close quote. What was relationship with Prudence when Kathy disappeared, colon, quote, not an intimate relationship, period, close quote. Kathy was going out with some interesting people too. March 81, November 81. I didn't see anybody else. Prudence, colon, quote, she doesn't really like me very much anymore, especially after Mary Hughes and Gilberta, close quote, called her.
Let me stop you. All of those comments about Prudence Farrow, were those Bob Durst? Were those his quotes?
I believe so.
Good, we've gone to the last page now.
Payphone, ellipsis. The call was from a payphone.
Let me stop you. This means again, payphone ellipsis, that's your shorthand for you're now going to be asking him about issues with the payphone, and it's going to be his response, Mr. Durst.
I believe so.
Please continue.
The phone was at a restaurant, Tata's Rest, which is my shorthand for restaurant. I went to Tata's. Kathy already had dinner that night. 11-11:30 p.m. Quote, she'd come back from Gilberta angry as hell at me, close quote.
Let me stop you. Does that mean that Mr. Durst told you that when she got home, the night she disappeared, that she was, quote, angry as hell at me? That's coming from Mr. Durst?
I believe so.
When you say you believe so, you would not have given your opinion about Kathy's mood the night she came home, correct?
She had developed where she drank frequently. Numerous incompletes in medical school, primarily because she was drunk a lot. Kathy got back from Gilberta's house very, very drunk. She wanted to go right into the city. She couldn't drive. That's why I took her to the station. We had planned on staying the week. Geraldine.
And what you just were quoting from where it said payphone, and you said the call was from a payphone all the way down to Geraldine, was that information that was provided by Mr. Durst?
I believe so.
Other than Mr. Durst providing you this information, at the time you were interviewing him, or afterwards, did you in any way attempt to verify the information he provided?
I don't remember.
Is it fair to say, Mr. Lockwood, that your role as a reporter, you were interviewing Mr. Durst, you were getting answers to questions that you asked him, and you were printing those answers. You ask a question, he gives you an answer, and you're printing those answers without critically analyzing in your stories whether those answers appear to be false, true, etc. Is that a fair statement of what your role was in writing these articles?
Well, I think it's a little more complicated than a yes or no.
Explain.
Well, a reporter wants to be taking interviews with the people involved in the story, and he or she should do the best to check out the information. a story like this, where we had some damaging information about Mr. Durst, we went to him, he agreed to speak to us, and I think we kind of put both of those sides into the story. And I have to leave it at that.
My final question is, what I'm asking you is in conducting the interview with Mr. Durst, was your role, as you believe, in the middle of the interview, for you to say to him, as an example, Mr. Durst, you say you haven't beaten your wife. What about blah, blah, blah? Was that what you viewed your role at the time you conducted the interview with Mr. Durst?
Well, we had information about his relationship with Kathy, and we wanted his response. So we had that back and forth going.
Right, and so what I'm basically asking you, Spike, was in the end, you're asking Mr. Durst questions, you're getting his responses. You're not there to go after his responses in any greater detail than simply question and answer.
I think we've got both sides of the story to this article.
Thank you. I'm not where we were.
And now the cross-examination.
Good morning again, Mr. Black. Good morning. Did you record your interview with Mr. Durst?
I don't remember.
Did you have the equipment to record interviews, tape recorders? Back in the
Yes.
Where did the interview take place?
To the best of my memory, it took place at a public relations office.
Company that had done work for Durst firms, if you recall?
I believe so.
Okay. But you don't have a memory of recording the interview?
I don't.
Has anybody asked you to search and see if there is a recording?
No.
So Mr. Lewis never asked you to look for any kind of tape recording?
No.
Any of the police from LA that have been associated with this asked you for the recording?
No.
Do you have a spot you think that might still exist in your own personal possession?
No.
How many times did you actually speak to Mr. Durst?
I have a memory of speaking to him once. I'll call it the big interview, the sit-down conversation. But I may have spoken to him prior to that as well.
As a reporter, an investigative reporter, when you are sitting down with a person that you're interviewing, before you get there, you conceptualize what it is you're going to be looking for?
Yes.
Okay. In this instance, your focus from the last two answers you gave probably was on the relationship between Mr. Durst and his wife?
Yes.
Because you were trying to figure out factually the nature of the relationship, correct?
Yes.
At any time when you were talking to Mr. Durst and asking questions, either in your memory or in the notes that you had several opportunities to review along the way, did Mr. Durst ever say to you, I'm not answering that question?
I don't recall.
And do you have, from the review of the notes, is there anything in your notes that you've reviewed up till now that suggests to you that Mr. Durst ever refused to answer one of your questions?
Based on these notes, there's nothing to indicate that.
And of course, if in the course of interviewing somebody for a story, you ask a question to which the person either refuses to respond or says no comment, that's something that an experienced reporter like yourself would know, correct?
I think that's fair to say.
In the interview, was anybody else present when you interviewed him? If you remember.
I kind of remember. I couldn't say for certain.
Let me ask you this. Early on, Mr. Lewin referenced the fact that your lawyers and the district attorney's office negotiated some guidelines for your testimony. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did Mr. Durst or his lawyers or any representative from the public relation firm negotiate the terms of your interview with Mr. Durst?